печеньку у зеленому саду. Чи не вийде дівчинонька рано вранці по ладу? Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду я вирвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду я вирвала. Вийшла дівчинонька рано вранці воду брать, а за нею козаченько веде коня напувать. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду я вирвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду я вирвала.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пихцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
For
Yes.
The lead Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1059 of the War News stream. And today we have very big news of Romania getting struck by Russian drones and also a NATO aircraft getting targeted by Russian air defense in a very bold move. But it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we've been getting very concerning news today about Russian escalation against NATO forces inside of the area of the Baltic Sea, as well as around the area of Romania. As breaking news came out last night that the Romanian Ministry of Defense has confirmed that 2 Russian drones did land and explode on the southern side of the Danube River Delta inside of the Republic of Romania, not causing significant damage, but once again showing that the Russian Federation is blatantly violating NATO sovereignty and borders of NATO allied members, and is continuing to conduct a subliminal campaign of terror against the eastern allies of the NATO sphere. Meanwhile, in a less than direct way, we were able to see a very concerning situation today involving a French maritime patrol aircraft, and the French government has been outraged since the incident occurred. We have been able to hear that a French maritime patrol aircraft was targeted and locked onto by a Russian S-400 air defense system within the territory of Kaliningrad. The Russians also turned on an electronic warfare jammer, completely scrambling the navigational systems of the maritime patrol aircraft, leaving it completely blind while it was flying over the Baltic and causing significant risk and danger to the crew of the French maritime patrol aircraft. This was a direct armed action by the Russian Federation against a NATO aircraft operating within legal parameters inside of the international waters of the Baltic Sea. This is a direct hostile action by the Russian Federation against NATO assets that are operating to ensure the strategic integrity of critical infrastructure within the area of the Baltic. We have also been able to hear of some very major news inside of the Russian Federation as well, as massive drone strikes have once again rained down throughout the entirety of Western Russia, south of Moscow, from Tula to Kaluga. Crimea, and all the way down in between. We've also been able to see that around the area of Ingles, for the 10th day in a row, the strategic fuel reserves for the Russian bomber fleet continues to burn to the ground in a very impressive display of fire and fury, the likes of which the world has never seen, and probably will see a little bit more of, to be entirely honest, if the Russians keep doing what they're doing. As it also appears that Dmitry PEskov, the foreign minister of the Russian Federation, has come out today and made it very clear that under no current circumstances will the Russian Federation seriously be considering peace. They've already stated that due to the U.S. preemptive actions that are being made before the new administration even comes into place, they are not even open at this point to negotiate a peace, meaning that peace talks will most likely than not happen in the spring, and we will see that the United States immediately moves into the peace through strength doctrine that we were already wanting to move towards in full force before this statement was even made by the Russian foreign minister today. Meanwhile, heavy fighting has occurred throughout the entirety of the front lines of Ukraine, from Kursk to Vovchansk and down towards the directions of Lyman, Bakhmut, and Pokrovsk. We've been able to see that the Russian Federation has taken significant losses on the battlefield today and appears to still be reeling from the general large amounts of damage that were set onto the Russian Federation some time ago in the past few days. We have also been able to hear in some smaller international news that North Korea has stated that the joint military actions by the United States and the Republic of Korea on the Korean Peninsula are absolutely too much for the North Koreans to bear, and they are going to respond. This is largely normal.
Womp.
Yeah, womp womp. This is largely normal, by the way, for everyone. This is something that we'll get into later. They do this every year. But we have also been able to hear in much major news that they have found the rat inside of the CIA that informed the Iranians that the Israeli-American attack was going to be incoming, which made us have to cancel the original attack plan along with the Israelis and then carve up a brand new one. He was actually apprehended inside of Cambodia and is currently inside of Guam at this moment, most likely to be transported back to the United States mainland to be held on trial for his crimes against the Republic and the crimes against national security interests that he has conducted against the United States of America, an act of treason by any measure. But moving on from that, we have been able to hear the major news today that inside of the Danube River Delta again, on the Romanian side of the border that is, there has been a major amount of damage caused by 2 Russian drones that once again veered off target as they normally have in the past, but this time the Romanian Ministry of Defense seems to be taking a much more serious approach to this. We were able to see the actual debris, this video being filmed by the Romanian Ministry of Defense, showing 2 Shahed 136 drones, most likely the Russian license-built variant called the Garan, and the damage that they inflicted onto the actual territory of Romania. These craters and the debris are not being seen on the northern side of the Danube inside of Ukraine. These are being seen on the southern side in the Danube Delta, which is almost entirely controlled by the Republic of Romania. The Republic of Romania has had to deal with a large amount of Russian drones going errant or going off course and slamming down inside of their territory, usually just across the river and within one specific area. Near the Plaru, on the southern side of the Danube near Izmail, this peninsula has been hammered with at least a dozen Russian drones over the course of the entire war, as the Russian Federation has always seen that these drones have gone errant over Izmail and then ended up landing somewhere in Romania and exploding on this peninsula. However, the exact details about where these drones landed seems to be a little bit more concerning, as these actually ended up landing near to some larger settled areas and exploding. And we were also able to get some additional information about this as well. And I want to make sure that we read this in its entirety, because this is speaking directly about the Romanian investigation and actions that were taken today in response to the Russian drones once again violating NATO sovereignty and causing damage to Romanian territory. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Romania, the MAE, strongly condemns the irresponsible attacks by Russian forces that violate all norms of international law. Russia's illegal and unprovoked aggression against Ukraine poses risks to the entire region. On the morning of January 17th, near the Romanian border in Tulcea County, the monitoring and surveillance systems of the Ministry of National Defense detected violations of Romanian airspace in the context of Russian forces resuming a series of drone attacks on civilian targets and port infrastructure infrastructure in Ukraine. The Ministry of National Defense, the MAPN, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the MIE, have informed and continue to inform allied structures in real time about the situations caused by the attacks, remaining in permanent contact with them, respect for sovereignty, security, and peace obligations that the Russian Federation systemically and unprovokedly violates, the persistent aggressive actions, the illegal occupation of neighboring territories, and the large-scale illegal war that Russia has been waging for nearly 3 years against a sovereign neighbor represent a persistent and serious threat not only to Ukraine, but to the entire Black Sea region and the eastern flank of the North Atlantic Alliance, according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This is a very concerning situation, as this is not the first time that this has been seen, and not only that, these did start to land near populated areas, possibly suggesting that in the future, it's not unlikely that one of these drones could land within a populated Romanian village and end up wounding and killing Romanian citizens that are subject to NATO protections under the Defensive Alliance's charter. This is something that once again is showing us that the Russian Federation is blatantly violating NATO's sovereignty with absolutely no regard for the consequences, and once again trying to force NATO's hand into getting involved in the war against them. This isn't really
these attacks are just reckless too, because they've been launching these attacks near the Romanian border for ages, and it always is inevitable. Every single time they do this, they're running the risk of shooting one right into Romania, and it always hits around the same place around Plaru inside of Romania, and it hit there again this time as well. So at some point, you do it so many times, it becomes unaccidental and it starts becoming purposeful, and I think we're at that point now, and it looks like maybe NATO's going to try to ignore it again, but we're not really sure. But to me, it seems like it's sort of like a little bit purposeful. It can't be an accident this many times.
And a lot of people have been talking about this. Loads of people have been talking about the Romanian drones striking inside the territory of Romania. And a lot of people are wondering, should NATO ignore or take action against this once again persistent threat that the Russian Federation continues to poses to Romanian citizenry, once again a part of a NATO alliance that continuously is seeing that the Russian Federation violates its borders, continues to cause great harm and damage to the citizenry's safety. And for this reason, there should be a serious conversation as to whether NATO should respond in any large way to stop further attacks or possible damage that could be caused to the citizenry of Romania and the NATO alliance at large. And Matthew, what are people currently thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like 45% of the audience said it's purposeful and NATO should react, while 25% said it's simply an accident and NATO should ignore it yet again, and 22% said we need more intel first. And once again, like I just got done saying, this is something that happens many times before, because Russia's launching attacks literally right there on the Romanian border. The Russians try to target the port of Reni and also the Ukrainian city of Izmail, and both of those are Ukrainian ports, and that's what the Russians are trying to strike. But of course, it's so close in proximity to the Romanian border, some of these drones happen to go right across. But at what point, though, like I just said, does it become non-accidental? And I would say we're at that point right now. So I don't think this should trigger Article 5 necessarily immediately, but this should maybe trigger an Article 4 convention or a meeting at least to discuss how this is going to be dealt with into the future. So we shouldn't just ignore it and not make a statement whatsoever and pretend like it never happened. That would be the wrong thing to do, but NATO should meet to discuss it at least. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that in my opinion, I do believe that NATO should take some far stronger action in response to this. I do not believe that an invocation of Article 5 is necessary in this instance, considering that there was no one killed or wounded, but I do believe that the United States and Romania should immediately create an air defense wall around the area of the Danube River Delta, so that way if a Russian drone or a Russian missile was to even get close, we actually would fire at it and shoot it down before it could impact the ground and cause serious damage or loss of life for the Romanian citizenry living within this area. Each NATO country is provided the same equal protections according to the NATO charter as any other. Inside of NATO, there's not supposed to be a distinction as to whether Romania is a major partner and whether they're deserving of any kind of serious protections. Each country is treated equally. And for this reason, the fact that Romanian citizenry are having to pretty much hide inside their houses, much like the Ukrainians on the other side of the river, and they are not even involved as direct belligerents on a national level in this conflict, but nevertheless, they still have to suffer the same consequences of having to hide from incoming Russian drone attacks. I would say that it's entirely prudent that the United States of America specifically spearheads a campaign with Romania to protect Romania's skies. If the Russian Federation has an issue with that, the answer is very simple. You shouldn't be flying your drones into Romanian airspace, or much less impacting them onto the territory of Romania, which is a NATO country protected by the NATO Charter. But something even more serious happened today, which is unprecedented so far in the entirety of the war. Something that is actually really enraged the French Republic in serious form today, as we have been able to hear that within the Baltic Sea, a major incident happened in between a French maritime patrol aircraft and that of the Russian Federation's air defense inside the area of Kaliningrad. According to the information that we have at the moment, and I'll be making sure to click down here really quickly so that way we can tell y'all, France has decreed a Russian S-400 radar locking onto its maritime patrol aircraft over the Baltic Sea. You can actually see a picture of this maritime patrol craft right here. This one is actually produced by Dassault, which Dassault produces a large amount of aircraft for the French Air Force and the French Navy, this aircraft particularly being used by the French Navy. But let me go get y'all some particular details here and information about that aircraft to let y'all know what its mission was, to kind of give y'all an idea of how serious this incident was. So let me go to French Navy aircraft, and let's see here. Here we go, French Naval Aviation. This is exactly what we're looking for. And then we want to find the list. So, let's see, here we go. This is it. This is the maritime patrol aircraft that was locked onto today. These aircraft are a very specialized type of aircraft inside the French Navy, and they have approximately 22 of these. It's a fairly significant number of them to have, especially considering that the French Navy isn't the largest kind of a, I guess you could say, air arm for a navy in the world. These aircraft are to be replaced here in the future by an Airbus A321 that's modified for the anti-sub warfare role, or the maritime patrol aircraft role, but nevertheless, these aircraft are very specialized in their mission and their purpose. These aircraft around the entirety of the world are able to protect a nation or an alliance, in particular for France, from the possibility of an enemy submarine slipping through a surface fleet's defensive structure and then making it into the open sea to wage unmitigated warfare against commercial and wartime shipping being conducted by our alliance. This French aircraft was in the area, most likely patrolling for Russian submarines that were attempting to bypass the NATO fleet in the area, or at least observe the Russian submarines as they may be trying to break into the open ocean into the North Atlantic. These aircraft actually have a pretty cool little mission and some pretty interesting sorts of systems on board. Generally, they aren't armed in the conventional sense. This thing would not be running around firing off missiles at other aircraft, or for that matter, even dropping bombs or launching anti-ship missiles in its normal operation. These things are actually outfitted with what's called a sonar buoy, and sonar buoys are incredibly interesting as they're dropped out of the aircraft and they land by parachute onto the surface of the ocean, and once they land, the buoy, the sonar buoy itself, actually sits there and floats on the surface, and under the buoy, inside the water, a giant rope is lowered deep into the sea, several hundred feet down, with a very advanced microphone on the end of the wire, for the large part. That microphone is sensitive enough that it can pick up the sound of a submarine's propeller if it's traveling at a high enough speed. Even at lower speeds, modern-day sonar buoys can pick up these submarines, especially if the sonar buoy is only dropped a couple of miles away. This is the way and the ability that really most militaries in the Western world, and really most militaries worldwide, have to be able to try and find and detect enemy submarines that may be operating within the area. This French aircraft, from what we understand, was largely involved in some sort of a maritime patrol operation similar to this, trying to find and detect a Russian submarine that may be in the area and trying to figure out its likely course out of the Baltic and into the open North Sea, and then further on into the Atlantic. The Russian Federation, in the middle of the French conducting this maritime patrol operation, locked an S-400 air defense system radar onto the aircraft, which immediately started to send off the RWR systems on board. These aircraft, while not being able to conduct any offensive actions, at least in a conventional sense, are able to conduct a large amount of defensive actions, and much like any modern military aircraft, this aircraft does have an RWR on board. RWRs are a specifically built system that detect when an enemy radar has directly locked onto the aircraft and when a launch of a surface-to-air missile may be imminent. The Russian S-400 system, which is currently based inside of the area of Kaliningrad, apparently locked directly onto the aircraft with its radar, and at that point, if the Russians really flipped the toggle for the missile to be fired, that French aircraft most likely would have been shot down today by the Russian Federation's air defense systems that were inside of Kaliningrad. This
That's just wild, like how close of a call that was. Like, I don't think many people understand how bad this really was. Like, of course, the Russians actually have to go through with pushing the button to take the plane down, but they were literally, like the enforcer just said, a button away from taking the plane straight out of the sky and putting it right into the ocean. That was crazy close.
this was one button away. I want to emphasize that. One flip of a switch, one pull of the trigger away from starting World War III, what the Russian Federation did today with this French aircraft. This French aircraft was also subject at the exact same time as the RWR was screaming at the pilots that there was a active radar lock being made by an air defense system onto the plane. An electronic warfare system was also turned on and directed directly at the aircraft, completely scrambling any kind of digital navigation systems and practically leaving the pilots blind. So for this reason, this aircraft had to pretty much fly, according to what we've heard, in a straight line, not really veering off of the path all too much, until eventually the electronic warfare signal faded and they were able to once again recalibrate their position and then fly out of the area. This has caused a major diplomatic outrage inside of the French government, and rightfully so. Locking on to any aircraft with an active RWR system on board is a very serious thing. Very rarely, if ever done, in any kind of a circumstance at all. Even usually in air defense interception missions that the United States and Russia conducts against each other, very rarely are active radar locks ever made onto any of those aircraft. It's not incredibly common. And so this is why in this particular instance, this situation has really made it to the front lines of the news on this channel today. This was a major provocation by the Russian Federation. This is the closest, as a matter of fact, from what we understand, to the Russian Federation actually firing a shot in anger at any NATO aircraft, any NATO soldiers, or any NATO equipment at any point in the active war in Ukraine. It's never gotten closer than this so far. And this was a very, very concerning thing, and I also believe that it's telling us something else. It may have been, I'm having a feeling that the Air Defense Battery Commander did not know this at the time, but it may have been that a Russian Kilo-class submarine was attempting to transit the area using its electric batteries to try and pretty much slide under the NATO surface fleet, which just moved into the area with 10 vessels and the Operation Baltic Sentry operation, and may have been trying to surveil that fleet or try and keep an eye on them and figure out exactly where they were and what they were doing, or at least to help out with Russian sabotage efforts. The French aircraft was conducting its normal patrol, most likely completely unaware that there was a Kilo-class submarine or any kind of a Russian submarine within the area, and was just dropping its sonar buoys as a act of the normal mission that would be conducted by these kinds of maritime patrol aircraft. With this information in mind for the battery commander, if he had been informed of this, he may have locked on to the French aircraft to divert them from their ordinary sonar buoy sweep and to stop them from being able to possibly detect the Kilo-class submarine that may have been shadowing the NATO surface fleet that is currently there at the moment. That is, of course, highly laden with a lot of assumptions, as we do generally know that the Russian Federation is incredibly poor at disseminating vital information to make sure that a combined arms operation can be conducted. So it's probably a lot more so the case that the Russian air defense system locked onto the French aircraft just for the fact that they could, and there really was no larger sort of a prerogative or any clandestine action that was being conducted there to try and protect some sort of a larger Russian interest. Still,
and also, by the way, I see a question from the audience here from Judy in the live chat. She said, "I thought the ships could pick up the subs. So how's it sneaking through?"
The ships can pick up the subs, but there is a thing called well, not really for, well, actually there kind of is for warships as well. There's a thing called the baffles, where you cannot pick up the sound of a submarine with the passive sonar. And also another thing that we have to put out there is that passive sonar only works so well, especially with a diesel-electric submarine. And this is going to have to weigh heavily in on my limited understanding of naval warfare. So let me go and get you all the Kilo-class submarine really really quickly to try and explain a lot about the technical details of what we're looking at here. The Kilo-class submarine works off of a very old technology. In fact, the technology is practically as old as modern submarines themselves. And also, hopefully, Walter E. Lakota is in here because you'll be able to corroborate or deny anything that I'm saying here. Because I just saw you say that, Matthew. I was like, hopefully he's here.
Yeah.
But
I did a general call like Batman. I was like, "Where's Walter?"
man, put up in the sky, like get a spotlight and put a giant anchor in front of it. Walter E. Lakota will show up. Like it'll be no, he is correct or wrong, or it's going to be something like that. But the Kilo-class diesel-electric submarine works off of a propulsion system that is as old as modern submarines. And modern submarines really came about with the creation of the German U-boat a little bit before World War I. And that is diesel-electric power. Diesel-electric power, interestingly enough, is the exact same kind of power that propels most locomotives across the entirety of the United States. But how it works in a Kilo-class submarine is that it has large diesel motors in the back of the submarine. But these also have large batteries inside the submarine as well. These don't happen to burn and explode like any of the ones in California, just letting y'all know. But beyond that, the diesel engines will run and not only operate the submarine, but charge up the batteries that are inside of the sub. If the submarine ever gets into a situation, also, by the way, I forgot to tell you all this, this is a bigger downside to diesel-electric submarines, is that when the diesel engines are on, the submarine cannot submerge. It has to do something called snorkeling, which means that it has to stay pretty much on the surface or be very close to the surface, so that way the diesel engines can have an access to oxygen, so that way everyone doesn't suffocate from carbon monoxide from the diesel engines running. But once the diesel engines charge up the batteries inside of the submarine, the diesel engines can be shut off, and the submarine is pretty much completely undetectable. The only thing that would really give away this submarine is the sound of the propeller, and only then would it be at high speeds, through something called cavitating, which is when the propeller spins so fast that it starts to create bubbles of air inside the water, which is incredibly loud on passive sonar and can be picked up somewhat easily. If the submarine is traveling at any speed less than about 15 knots, it's probably likely that this submarine is largely undetectable to a passive sonar on board any conventional warship that NATO has in the area right now, unless if they're only a few miles away, and I'm saying like 3 to 2 miles away, meaning that it would be a needle in a haystack for a NATO warship to really know exactly where this is. That's where the French maritime patrol aircrafts come in, or really any maritime patrol aircraft. These aircraft will go around in a pattern, and they will lay out sonar buoys. And I'll actually explain to you all what that pattern will really look like, at least a little bit. So this is where our first sonar buoy is going to be dropped, right here. They'll fly further east, drop another, and then they'll turn north and drop one up here, and then they'll fly back towards the west, drop another one here, and they'll keep dropping it, largely in a pattern like this, because it creates a sonar buoy grid. And the Maritime Patrol aircraft is able to ensure that it keeps an active line with each sonar buoy and is able to pick up any noises that are picked up from them. So for the large part, with a sonar buoy grid laid out like this, you can largely detect and listen to a submarine within this area, especially if it's very close to the sonar buoy, and practically get its exact depth, speed, as well as direction from the sounds that are being picked up by the sonar buoys. So the aircraft is able to do this job a lot better than any of the surface ships. That's why the aircraft was most likely in the area. But the Russian S-400 system near to Kaliningrad, most likely near to the coast, locked onto the aircraft, stopped it from being able to conduct this mission, and also electronically jammed its signal, making it impossible for them to properly navigate as well, at least for a short time. Also, I was just told by a Walter E. Lakota to pull up Certas, and we are going to do that really quickly. And so, let's take a look. Oh my lord, I'm stupid. I'm so sorry, Walter E. Lakota. Yes, there is the towed array. I know what the towed array is. It's just that I completely forgot about it. But this is a line. Let me see if I can show you all this. I guess this is the best one that we got. Let's see. Maybe this one? Yeah, I guess this will be fine. But there is such a thing as a towed array, which is pretty much a large rope, kind of like a sonar buoy, that they just roll off the back of the ship, Usually this is hidden below decks on some of the larger vessels that have a towed array. In these examples, you can visibly see the spool that holds the wire for the towed array. But much like a sonar buoy, it also has a microphone attached to the end, and they're able to unwind this from the back of the ship, extending it several hundred yards, maybe even sometimes a quarter or a half of a mile away from the ship, and they're able to use it as pretty much a mobile sonar buoy directly behind the ship at all times. That is something that is usable and could be used to detect submarines as well, and also give it a wider catchment area to pretty much defeat the issue with a passive sonar being in the baffles. But still, at this moment, we're generally understanding that while that is being used, the maritime patrol aircraft was in the area to give a wider catchment zone to possible detection abilities and the detection of any Russian sub that might be in the area. So I hope that explains as best I can in my understanding of how this form of naval warfare would work, especially with the anti-submarine role. But nevertheless, a lot of people are talking about the big thing that happened today beyond the actual strategies and tactics that would be used by NATO to try and detect a Russian submarine, which is the fact that Russia targeted a NATO recon aircraft today with an S-400 battery and jammed its navigational systems simultaneously. And a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts on what they think this is and how they think we should take it. And everyone, for the large part, unanimously at this point is saying that this is a clear, direct act of war. Some others are saying that that's just the usual Russian stupidity, and some people are saying it seems hostile, but it's not that serious, and some others are undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so about 48% of the audience said it's a clear and direct act of war, while 26% said that's just the usual Russian stupidity, while 20% said it seems hostile but not that serious. And honestly, on this one right here, in my opinion, 100%, this is a clear and direct act of war. Now, the question is NATO going to treat it like that? Because it's obviously an act of war, because they jammed the systems here on the aircraft, and they also got a target lock with a very potent air defense system. So if that's not an act of war, then I don't know what is. I have a feeling NATO's going to try to overlook it. Now, I don't think NATO's even given a statement about it. I think the French are the only ones who have actually stated anything about this incident, and that's how we learned about it. So I don't think NATO's going to respond to it. To me, that is coming across as a bit weak. This is something we should actually respond to. Now, the Romania situation may or may not respond to that. That one's a little bit debatable, but this one should be responded to. This is a clear violation right here, and to overlook this one would be a grave injustice. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would agree. This is akin or paramount to a direct act of war on a NATO aircraft. To lock onto it with a weapon system. I want to remind you all of this. Let's think about this more in a physical perspective. If a Russian infantryman on the border at Estonia, at the border crossing at Narva, walked up to this bridge right here, looked to the other side, and aimed a rifle at an Estonian border guard, that would be a serious ordeal. Even if he didn't shoot at the Estonian border guard, that would be making international news, and everyone would be talking about how aggressive the Russian Federation is, how dangerous this is, and why the Russians need to be stopped, because they were about to shoot this poor little Estonian border guard right there. Now, the same thing happens, but instead of it being a rifle, they're aiming a whole damn air defense system at a French aircraft near Kaliningrad, and they're about to shoot down an aircraft that probably has a crew of about 9 people on board. The aircraft itself costs tens of millions of dollars, and not only that, it is actively conducting an operation within international waters within the confines of international law. And yet hardly a word is spoken anywhere around the world except for inside of France about what happened today. This is paramount to nearly going to war today. If the Russians had actually flipped the toggle to fire off an S-400 missile, this aircraft would have been destroyed without a doubt. Russian air defense systems usually are not that great, but with a slower moving maritime patrol aircraft like this, that really is never supposed to be in a situation where it is actively engaged by any kind of an air defense system, this is extremely dangerous. These crew members were at serious peril and risk of being killed this day, and it's crazy to think that there's hardly any mention of it beyond this channel. But beyond that, we should treat this...
Oh, well, go ahead and finish. I had a question from the audience I was about to take.
We should treat this as an act of war, and I would say that we should respond to this in a way where we will not start the war, but if the Russians want to start it, we sure as hell will finish it. The French Navy does have some Dassault Rafales that are available at their disposal, and let me go show you all these. It's actually one of my favorite planes right here. This thing is just gorgeous looking, but beyond that, these are produced by Dassault. It's entirely a French creation, and this is the most advanced aircraft that the French Air Force and the Navy have currently. But more importantly, the Dassault Rafale actually has access to a wide array of Western weaponry. And I want to make sure that I get down here to the bottom. You can see that a lot of people have been writing about the Dassault Rafale. They just look too good. I mean, look at that. I mean, these things are just wildly good looking. But most importantly, let me get down here and let me show you all the weaponry that this thing can carry. All right, so the weaponry that this aircraft can carry, I want to make sure that we're getting this correct here. And let me see here. Let me see here. Hang on. Hang on. Well, hang on. Let me look here. Where the hell is the anti-radiation missile? What? Where is it? Hang on. Let me look here. An air-ground missile. Yeah, we know about that one. The Paveway, the Hammer, the Storm Shadow, the Apache. Is that there? Let's see. Huh. Can it not carry any kind of anti-radiation missiles? Is this thing not SEED operable? Hang on, let me go look at that. Rafale SEED. Let me see if I can find that. Let's see. Yes, so technically the Rafale can carry anti-radiation missiles like the AGM-88 HARM. It is compatible with that weapon system. For some reason, it's actually not being listed on Wikipedia, but the Rafale can carry AGM-88 HARMs, which are a form of an anti-radiation missile. And this is why modern war requires trained professional soldiers, not conscripts, because I'm sure that many of y'all can see now through all of my explaining of how submarine detection or anti-submarine warfare works, and then also explaining how pretty much defense against air defense works. A lot of y'all can probably see, wow, this is really complex and convoluted, and this is just the skimming the surface of it. That's why the Western world would excel against Russia in a conventional war, is because we actually have trained contract soldiers that are actually ironed out and well trained in these specific roles. But beyond that, just to give you all an example here of what the French could do to defend their aircraft in the future, is that they could deploy Rafales equipped with AGM-88 HARMs or some other equivalent of an anti-radiation missile. These things actually lock on to radiation emissions that are made by radar systems. So when a radar is on, it is emitting a certain kind of a frequency over an electromagnetic field, and in the end, it is a form of radiation. This missile has a special detection system in the nose cone to be able to detect and hone in on that specific radiation source, meaning that any system in the world that operates on an active radar sending out some form of a pulse into the sky, this missile would be able to pick up on it and start flying directly to that source. The radar of an air defense system is its eyes. The missile systems themselves, which are usually the most famous parts of any system, like the S-400, are completely blind without the radar. This thing cannot fire if it does not have an actual radar guiding the missile, or even picking up a lock for a missile to be launched. And let me see really quickly. Here's one of the radars right here. So the missile, the AGM-88 HARM, would be able to lock onto and be fired at this specific radar. So when the missile is fired, the Russians have two options. They can either keep this radar on and attempt to engage the Rafale, which fired the AGM-88, try and pick up the AGM-88 and shoot it down while it's flying towards the radar, or they can shut the radar off and all of the missiles that they have that are airborne at that time will go errant, meaning that they go off course and they're no longer able to hit their target. Usually, the scenario that is involved in this sort of an operation is that the Russians would most likely turn off the radar and stow it while the AGM-88 HARM is in flight, so that way the radar doesn't end up getting destroyed. If the radar is destroyed, the battery is completely useless beyond that point. So that would mean that the French maritime patrol aircraft would be able to bide itself enough time, thanks to the active air defense by the Dassault Rafales, to be able to leave the area before this radar is turned back on and attempts to engage the Rafales, which are firing AGM-88 HARMs at the system. That would most likely be the best way to treat the Russians at this point, because the fact that they were putting a defenseless maritime patrol aircraft at risk today of being shot down and all crew members on board being killed, this is something that we need to consider and treat as something wildly serious. And I do believe that the French should be given the green light by the United States and other allies to be able to allow escorts of these aircraft by Dassault Rafales in the area equipped with anti-radiation missiles, so that way if the Russian Federation does this again, they can also get the ping as they're hearing that an active lock is being made by an anti-radiation missile that will be fired right back at them if they launch an S-400 from the air defense system. I think that would be the best way to work with this. But Matthew, I heard that you had a question right before I started on that massive massive monologue about what we could do to respond. And what was that question from the chat, if it's still there?
Let me see if I can grab that real quick. It's probably a good ways up there now. Let's see here. This one went to, I think it was Anonymous. Let me try to scroll back up to find it. Let's see here. Anonymous said, would NATO's response be different if it were a U.S. plane? And I have a feeling the NATO response probably would be different if it was. I'm not saying that because I'm biased because we're American or anything like that. If it was an American plane that was locked onto, first of all, I don't think Russia would have done that. That would have probably been something they would have shied away from. But since this was a French NATO plane, they felt a little bit more emboldened to do it. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to say that I believe that the situation would be different if the United States was the one that had been locked onto, because right now, with the Republic of France hearing the news, let me go show you this, only 68 million people are hearing about what's happening right now. If it happened to a U.S. aircraft, 360 million people would be hearing about it at a minimum, and considering just the amount of people that would be hearing that information if it was a U.S. aircraft, that would start to spread through the alliance fairly quickly. Also, another thing is that most countries, unless if you're in Europe, unless if you're in the European Union or just in Europe in general, really don't pay attention a lot to the news, because for them, it's more so local news at that point, and so it just seems as though this is falling on deaf ears in all directions. That's at least the best explanation I could give as to why that's going on, because beyond that, I'd have no understanding as to why this isn't just, being yelled about from the mountaintops everywhere about what happened today and how much danger that French maritime patrol aircraft was in at that time. We were literally one trigger's pull away from World War III at that point. But still, I hope that does address that well, or at least the answer to that question, because this was a very serious incident that happened today. But beyond that, hopefully we'll be able to see that the French are able to protect their anti-submarine warfare aircraft in the future, and hopefully we'll be able to see that something like this does not happen again. Also, one other thing I forgot to tell y'all, this is an additional feature of the maritime patrol aircraft. Because a lot of y'all were probably thinking, wow, that's really cool about the sonar buoys. But what does it do when it figures out that there's a submarine? This thing also carries torpedoes as well, so the aircraft gets very low to the water at a slower speed, pretty much skimming the surface of the water, and then they drop the torpedoes out of the open bomb bay that you're seeing right there, pretty much right on top of the sub. And once the torpedoes have a drag chute on them to also slow them down further, so that way they don't end up disintegrating on impact with the water. But once they enter the water, the torpedoes usually follow a circular pattern, pinging their active sonar. Each torpedo has an active sonar on board, and once it picks up a signal, that torpedo will go straight towards that signal and hit the submarine. There's a whole other conundrum of anti-torpedo tactics that a submarine could pull off to try and evade a torpedo, but generally at that point, it's going to be a fight for the life for that submarine, because it's going to be fighting to evade that torpedo, and the anti-submarine warfare aircraft would most likely drop an additional second and third torpedo if it sees that the submarine is having a fairly easy time of evading the first one only. But anyways, there's a lot to talk about there with that kind of stuff, and to be honest with y'all, this is really surface level information about naval warfare. It is very complex, very in-depth, far more than I'm even explaining right here, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because this is literally just like naval warfare 101. It's not anything incredibly deep, and talking about different sonar systems, all that kind of stuff, forming knuckles, and also every other thing that can be done to evade a torpedo. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on from this French maritime patrol aircraft and the major news that happened inside the Baltic Sea today, as we have even larger news coming out from the Russian Federation, as we were able to hear that the Russian Federation has been driven to its knees again for the 6th day in a row, as Ukrainian drones have rained down from the skies above, hitting strategic Russian infrastructure and once again causing serious damage to Russian warfighting abilities inside of Ukraine. And that is moving us straight into the Russian Federation, as we've been able to see that major drone attacks are once again happening again inside of the country. And here is just a couple of amalgamated clips before we get into the specific details of each one. Here's another. Oh, boy.
It's very thirsty out here in the city, Bliat. It's time to turn the heaters off. No natural gas.
You better watch out, you better not cry, you better not pout, I'm telling you why. The air raid sirens are on. it's like man.
Взорвали наш ПВ.
Drones are here, they're hitting our shit, and burning it down to the freaking ground. It's like, I am crying and pooping, the economy's failing. But that's the Russian version of, Mr. Father Frost is coming to town. But anyways, пиздец, блядь.
Хавал туда.
I had to just like casually looking out the window at this like it's a normal occurrence.
It is a normal occurrence. That's the thing. But beyond that, it's just beautiful to see. It's just great, you know? And now let's
They're
get
having a karaoke going on in the background too. It sounds like they're in like a concert hall or something. Somebody's on a microphone hooked up to a PA system.
Man, honestly, man, it sounded like someone out there was about to go, "Stay with me." You know that song? You know, the one that's from like Japan?
I think so.
Yeah. But anyways, let's get into the details of these attacks, because the attacks were juice. Straight up juice. One of the major attacks that happened tonight, there was really two major ones that we saw with two independent pools of videos that we were able to get from them. One of the big ones happened in Kaluga. And Kaluga Oblast is actually somewhat big, and actually sounds kind of fun because Kaluga is just fun to say. But beyond that, there is a whole bunch of towns inside of Kaluga, outside of the town of Kaluga, which the Oblast is named after. There is the town of Baby Nino, named after Nino the baby. There's also one called Kura Kino, named after Kura the Kino. We've also been able to see that there's a couple of others like O0, or O0, which means that, you know, an O stands for zero. Very, very smart naming. And we also got to see that apparently one town was named after their affection for ramen, Romano. But most importantly, down towards the southern end of the Oblast is this town, Liudi Novo, meaning that there is just Novo Liudi. But beyond that, inside of this town, there are a couple of significant industrial sites that have helped the Russian Federation to be able to continue on their war effort. And there's also this one train station here that honestly looks like it's completely fallen to the ground. It just looks pitiful. I mean, this is like hell out here. But also, one more thing I just wanted to share with you all. They use concrete ties in Russia, which is very interesting because those are actually somewhat expensive. And also, I don't know why, because I would bet that the Russians don't pre-stress these, so these are prone to cracking a good bit, which may be another reason why we've seen that the Russian Federation has been suffering a decent amount of derailments. It may not even be because of sabotage activity. It may just be for the fact that the concrete ties that they're using are cheaply made, most likely not pre-stressed before installation, and may just be cracking, and because of that, the welded joint rail above it just starts to kind of, you know, move farther and farther away over time, and then the trains just derail. Maybe. That's a possible theory, because that was a big issue with concrete ties in the US when they were first being introduced. We've largely fixed that problem by pre-stressing the ties before they're installed onto the rails. But moving on from that, anyways, that's a whole side note, a whole little train rabbit hole deal. Beyond that, Leonova got freaking blown up. So let's get into the clips and let's take a look. Here's the first one, and we can already hear the Russian going, "Bubble!" So here it is.
Oh, look, debris fell from the sky and it caught it on fire. Oh my goodness.
Man, there's legitimately like a nightclub back there. Listen.
Yeah, it really is. It's like, I guess it's coming from this car.
I don't think it was coming from the car, man. I think it was coming from down the street, because it sounded like that SpongeBob like it literally sounded like that, man. Like there's just people jamming down the street while this major facility burns.
You know, I like it how the Russians say it's debris every single time. It's like, has that not gotten old at this point? Who's believing that?
Apparently everyone. I mean, at least the Sloloviv and goofs like them are saying, "I can't believe it, all this debris is causing damage." It's like, it's not debris. The drone scattered its debris around after it blew up. Like, the debris exists because it blew up on the facility. It's like, it's not like the Russians shot it down and then they went, "Oh, it hit the facility with the debris." Like, man, but you know something, man? I already heard this, man. I heard a rumor out there. United 24 is about to make a video, and they're gonna go, "Here is why Ukrainian drone debris is the best in the world," or something like that. It's coming around, probably. But moving on.
They'd be right, at least, on that one.
Probably so, because the Ukrainian drone debris seems to be nuclear with the amount of damage that it can cause. But here's another clip of the fire.
That fire is very red.
Man,
policeman.
Dude, it's as red as Lenin and Marx. It is the fires of communism. it's like
Great heavens. The Red Scare. This time the Russians are scared of it.
Man.
Also, someone must be burglarizing or looting somewhere. I hear an alarm going off.
Dang! Man, that's cooking.
That's hot.
Попали все-таки, да?
Wait, you hear the rave again.
The Russian fires are so hard to put out because they have a lack of water or agua in their country.
Here in Ukraine, we have more water than the rest of the world, or something like that. But moving on from that,
We ship water around the world for every country to enjoy.
Man, we see it burning again.
Oh, it's the town crier meeting out here. They're going to take a peek.
Man, one of the Russians is about to go, here ye! Here, here, our town is on fire. Like, it's like, just wanted to let you know. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also get to see the fire from another angle. A lot of these videos are ending up being duplicates, but we want to make sure to knock out all of them, just so we all get the full impact of the flames.
I like it when we have like 50 different angles of the fire. Gives you a good idea of how large it is.
Man, I gotta say, it's a wonderful thing. And of course, the town of Lyudanovo, or Lyudanovo, is going to be a little bit warm here over the next few days. But once again, we really don't know exactly where it hit yet. It may have hit these little storage tanks down here next to this gas station. They have a gas station in the... What the hell? It's right outside the facility.
It's wait a minute, a gas station outside the oil facility?
Yeah, like I guess it's just hooked up to it.
Huh, that's kind of weird. That's interesting. I guess that's the freshest gas you can get.
I guess so. The roads look like hell. But also this is run by Rosneft.
Oh, Rosneft. It kind of looks like a Waffle House a little bit, like in the little convenience store part.
Man, if it's run like a Waffle House, if you walk in there to try and get a Slim Jim, you just get your ass beat, and then you get some eggs, like, scrambled or something, you know? Like, if it's a Waffle House, that's gotta be what's happening inside of that gas station. But still, what an interesting place. And look, that's a map of the facility, apparently, too. So I guess it's like a tour.
Convenient.
Yeah, that's really convenient. So, you know, if you want to, like, lob a Molotov in there, you kind of know where to throw it. But yeah, apparently this is just a Rosneft gas storage facility right here, mind you. And the gas station's right there.
That's real convenient. I like that. And they put the map right outside for the saboteurs to get ready to go in. It's like, here's the map for the special forces to go in and destroy our best refinery.
Here is why Ukraine special forces are the best in the world. The Russians put maps outside of their facilities to let us know exactly where to strike them and when to strike them, letting us get more boom per buck, or something like that. But moving on from that and out of this area, I'm assuming that that must have been what was hit, because it appears to be the only flammable liquid storage area within the city. That sounded really political, like when I put it that way. This appears to be the only oil tanks in the entirety of the city, so I'm assuming that's why it is burning that horrendously, because I couldn't imagine any other major industry in this town, both the existing ones and the ones that have bushes growing on the roofs, would be not burning that much. Also, how in the hell do you get bushes growing on the roof of this building? Like, how the hell did you
That
manage?
tells you the topsoil has gotten caught on the roofs, and it's not the best roofs that we've ever seen in the world.
Here is why Russia is converting former industry into agricultural purposes, or something like that. It's like,
Because of a lack of proper maintenance.
dude, they ought to make worker safety videos like that. You know, like, make sure to lift with your legs and not your back. Make sure to be the best lifter in the world. You know, something like that.
Someone said, that sounds like the crappy strip club owner or announcer. It sounds kind of greasy a little bit, I'm not going to lie.
Man, to the window, to the wall, or something like that. Oh man! But anyways, moving on from Lyudanovo and out of that area, we're now going to be moving on over into the area of Tula. Tula is a city of historic significance in the Russian Federation, as the entire town largely grew out of the foundation of the Tula Arsenal on Tula Island near Upper River. Many of y'all will remember the joke I made about Upper River and how everyone working Tula is most likely on uppers, probably a factual statement, but nevertheless, I will not make that joke again today because Anthony Studebaker will not allow it. But nevertheless, the city of Tula is one of significance, at least for the Russian Federation historically, as well as industrially, thanks to the Tula arsenal, and also other major industries that lie on the outskirts. For example, this metallurgical plant here, that looks like the depths of hell because they don't clean up the coal dust or really manage that at all. But honestly, some areas look like that in the United States. When you work with steel, the coal gets everywhere, and coke does too. And I'm not talking about Pablo Escobar coke. I'm talking about coke, which is the byproduct of baking coal. But beyond that, this is something that I have to say is fairly interesting to note, at least for those who may be interested in what Tula is. But beyond that, Tula was cooking because an oil depot was hitting Tula. Check this out. What tuck that lid?
Mish.
And that is the end of that clip right there. And moving on from that, great to see that MASH is making a return to television. We were also able to see the fire right here.
Just fires all over the place. Oh, those fires, those fires. It's almost like Russia's getting hit with as many fires as we're getting hit with, and we're not even at war.
Let's see here. You know something, Matthew? I was actually wanting to show people Coke. And when I pulled up Coke, it pulled up Coca-Cola. So let me try that again.
The inaugural Coke.
Here we go. Coke Coal. Coke Coal. It's a hard and porous coal-based fuel with a high carbon content. What they do, this is actually a really cool thing just to tell you all about this, because this is such an important part of the modern world that not really is focused on much anymore because it's something that happens in the background all the time. But speaking of the metallurgical plants, coal production is still a vital part of the world these days because coke is actually produced directly from coal. It's specifically bituminous coal, which is one of the most abundant types in the world. Anthracite coal really only exists inside the United States within 5 counties of Pennsylvania. It burns clean, there's no smoke, but it also it's slow burning, so it's not really that efficient for most uses. So most people use bituminous coal these days, not anthracite. But anyways, coke is baked coal, in a sense. Y'all know how charcoal is made, right? You know how charcoal is made, right, Matthew? They take firewood, then they burn it down, pretty much, or really smolder it down until everything is gone but the basic carbon elements. And that's what charcoal is. So it's about the closest thing you can get to coal without having coal. Coal is just raw coal. It's just almost completely carbon. But baking coal, not burning it, but baking it, will actually cook off the excess elements of the coal and turn it into a very clean, pure carbon source. And it is used in steel making. And steel making requires a lot of coke. Loads of coke. More coke than Pablo Escobar could ever give you. It's just an insane amount. And that is why in the modern day, no matter how far away we move, if we still require steel, there will always have to be a coal mine producing bituminous coal somewhere, so that way we can continue to produce steel. But nevertheless, it is a very interesting thing. And also, let's see, Tron said, who's smelling coke? Oh.
Yeah, looking at that postcard right there that was in the picture that you just scrolled past right here. It said postcard depicting coke ovens. And I was looking at this, how gleeful it looks and stuff. I was like, what if this was like a cartel like coke oven or something like that for real? And they made it all look all happy and gleeful and stuff like this. Oh, I don't know. I just thought I had in my head. I just had to say it out loud.
Dude, why the hell is there like a ray of sunshine coming out of the coke fountain? Yeah. Like I'm not going to lie, man.
I think way too glorious, I would say.
I think, man, that might be a workers' safety violation there with the amount of heat that's exiting that factory. I think everyone in there may have been incinerated, man. Like they're like, oh, and then meanwhile everyone inside's going, I'm burning alive, like because of the heat and like the freaking rays of light coming out of the thing. I mean, they're not just cooking coal; they're cooking people in that thing. But still, beyond that, it's a very interesting kind of a deal here. You can actually see a picture here of one of the coke companies. Once again, heavily involved with the railroads. A lot of coke is still transported by rail. Very little of it is transported by road or sea. Well, a lot of it is transported by sea. But anyways, moving on from that, It is a very interesting side note to just talk about really quickly, because one thing that I do have to point out is that because of this reason, coal production is a strategic resource, even in the modern day, as well as the ability to produce coke out of coal and then to produce steel. All of those things are strategic assets. Unfortunately, however, destroying a metallurgical plant like this one south of Tula, which would be vital to decreasing war production, is incredibly difficult. You can actually destroy a decent amount, or at least bomb a metallurgical plant a decent amount, and while it would be taken offline temporarily, it wouldn't take that long for it to be back online, because unlike that of an oil refinery, which uses very complex components and is practically a large still of a sense, they use pretty much the same processes as an alcoholic distillery would to be able to produce different kinds of oil products. This doesn't really work off of a similar principle. So for that reason, it actually would be a little bit more difficult to be able to knock one of these out for a significant amount of time and really get the return on investment for the attack. That's why you generally see throughout most wars, steel plants just really aren't targeted like refineries are, or for that matter, any other form of fuel production facility. They are just generally tougher to knock out, and if you do knock them out, it's not going to be for that long. But anyways, with that, I hope that does give you all an interesting little side note there about a potential target that exists in Tula, but most likely will never be attacked. Anyways, moving on from that, in that whole side note, it is great to see that the city of Tula got its own little fire and flame show last night, and that is coming at the exact same time as Peskov wanted to run his mouth on behalf of the Russian Federation and tell us that the war is going to keep going. This is according to Peskov. The Kremlin does not expect a change in the U.S. position on the Ukrainian conflict, despite statements about readiness for dialogue, saying that the war will continue. And that's interesting. I assume that the United States is now going to go all in on the peace through strength policy, and we're probably going to see that the Russian economy and the Russian military are brought to their knees over the remainder of this year, and then they'll maybe get to the negotiating table, or they'll maybe hurry up on collapsing, one or the other. Oh, by the way, speaking of which, that fire down in Ingles, it's been going on for 10 days now. It's still burning.
Look at those guys standing right in the middle of it. Look at that.
It's so warm. Like, that's what they're yelling from the middle of it. They're like, it's warm and I'm scared. Please do something like
the
that.
Russians have gotten so desperate they've resorted to ancient sacrifices.
Man, one of those Russians, man, you like walk up to him and he's in the fire and he turns around and he goes, "Stop looking, I'm burning here." You know, something like that. It's like, "Stop looking, I'm burning here." You know, something like that. But anyways, moving on from that clip, very nice to see that it's still burning. It's a beautiful flame, truly an impressive one. But with that, it's time for us to start getting on into the Ukraine war news itself on the front lines, as well as a little bit of additional news from the borders of Belarus near to Lithuania, which was a fairly concerning thing in itself, because it looks like the Belarusians may be trying to make defensive preparations along their borders. But before we get to that, I do understand, Matt, that we have a couple of questions to address tonight. So what do we got?
All right, so our first super chat of the night is going to go to none other than James Hughes, a longtime channel legend, and thank you very much, James, once again for that massive support. James says, once Putin declines to negotiate, what will our new admin do? In my opinion, lots of Bradleys, Abrams, and F-16s, plus non-combative in-country military advisors, and what are your thoughts?
I would have to say that's really a great start, James Hughes, to be entirely honest. Matthew and me actually talked about this a good deal yesterday and the day before on stream, and that generally was the route I was going down, but Matthew was going down an entirely different route that was just asinine. I'm just kidding. It was actually very good. And we ended up...
Whoa, Jack.
Whoa, Jack. It was actually really good, and we ended up blending the two together. So our general plan was that if the Russian Federation denies peace talks, which it clearly appears that they now are, we blended the two plans together to where that kind of military support would be provided to Ukraine to not really drive the Russians out of Ukraine. That would largely be impossible, and the offensive losses that Ukraine would take would probably be untenable, to be entirely honest, for what they would be gaining out of it, seeing how offensive operations have gone throughout the entirety of the war. So all of that additional equipment would be given to them, so that way they could stop the Russian Federation from ever making any other additional ground. And with that in mind, then we move on to the area where Russia really will be brought down to their knees, which is through bombing the Russian economy into oblivion like the Ukrainians are still doing today, and also inflicting even more serious, the most serious and stringent sanctions that could be applied to the Russian Federation through the war, through the remainder of it at least, until they collapse or give up. But with both of those in mind, with the Russians unable to make any kind of advances on the battlefield because of Ukrainian parity of firepower, not superiority necessarily, but parity of firepower, at least in conventional terms, and not only that, but with the Russian economy also rapidly shrinking, the Russian tax base decreasing, and Russian military spending abilities dropping to the wayside, the Russian Federation would be forced at that point to concede that they would never be able to win the war in Ukraine, and the West would simply outspend them and outlast them, and be able to eventually win the war. This would either force them to the negotiating table and make them give massive concessions to even get anything out of Ukraine, maybe even a small amount of territory, or they will continue the war as doggedly and stupidly as they are right now until the economy collapses, and in that economic collapse, we would most likely see that enough civil unrest would occur that there would be an attempted coup, or the Russian government would simply collapse and then be reformed in some new way. That's most likely what we're expecting at this point and what we would be wanting to do, because that seems to be the best course of action at this point. There still are some inherent risks with pushing forward with a plan like that. The Russians could freak out and go nuclear, literally, on Ukraine, or maybe even try and start a conventional war with the West, just to try and escalate it into a possible intercontinental nuclear exchange, but those are risks that we really will face even if the war goes on and is dragged on for years. We're really just pushing that crisis a couple of years further down the road. So, in my honest opinion, I am believing that the plan that we put forward yesterday, the combined one in between Matthew and me, is probably the best and most effective way to be able to get at the Russians and eventually win the war. And so with that, I hope
And
that...
it sounds like that's the plan that the next admin is going with, actually, surprisingly enough. Probably a good plan. Just sort of sit back and wait and let nature take its course within Russia, like the enforcer was saying. And it probably will take its course, and it's probably going to get hideous inside of Russia, to the detriment of the citizens. But, of course, they're not standing up, so maybe that'll spur them to action a little bit.
And once again, to remind everyone what the collapse of the Soviet Union looked like, once fuel prices started to skyrocket inside the Russian Federation, there was a great decrease in economic ability in Russia, which started to produce the economic downfall that we saw. The Russian economy had stagnated by the 1970s, the mid-1970s, and was starting to go into a backslide by the very late 1970s and on into the early to mid-1980s, but it really was from about 1984 onwards that we saw that the Russian Federation was simply starting to implode. The backslides that have been happening for about a decade up to that point were starting to create a decrease in economic production, specifically of vital fuel sources like oil, which is really the primary one for the Soviet Union at the time. With a decrease in the availability of oil, it became a lot more expensive to transport any kind of goods or any kind of items produced in the Russian Federation from one place to the other, which started to rapidly increase the price, meaning that the Soviet government could buy less with the same amount of money. At the same time, the Russian Federation was fixing the rate of the ruble. The ruble never inflated, and it never deflated. It was a set value pretty much at all times. Sometimes they bump it up a little bit, but that was only done by an act of the internal, let's see, what was it, Matthew? It was the internal committee or something like that, the Presidium, something along those lines, but it was only approved at the highest level, something like that. But beyond that, the Soviet Union started to see that they were able to afford less, and when they would afford less, it ended up creating a positive feedback loop, where affording less meant that less was being produced. Money was buying less and less, and eventually it went to the point that the Russian economy was pretty much stagnating, and the once somewhat filled, somewhat kind of all right grocery stores or general stores they had in the Soviet Union were getting down to having almost no products at all. In some stores, they used to have, in the earlier days of the Soviet Union, like the 70s, about 9 different varieties of cheese available. By the time that the Soviet Union collapsed, there was only one type of cheese available in most stores, because it was just simply too expensive to transport the variety of cheeses that used to be available. And that's just one example, and that was pretty much affecting the entire economy in the same way across the board. It was was really this economic stagnation and then downfall that was happening in the Soviet Union that was one of the most important and major elements that led to some internal members of the Soviet Politburo, or largely the internal committee, to attempt a quiet coup against Gorbachev. Gorbachev did not leave peacefully. There was a small coup that happened at the time, and Gorbachev was faced with the option. Because this faction had enough support in the military that if Gorbachev did not step down, a civil war would have begun in a nuclear-armed country, which could have had catastrophic results that would have only happened inside the inside the Soviet Union. So Gorbachev decided to step down and to allow this new group to come forward and create the Russian Federation. And this, of course, was at the very end of the collapse, when the Russian Federation was really one of the last. In fact, it was really just Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Russia were the last remnants of the Soviet Union. Everyone else had declared independence at that point. And also, another
also real quick, Enforcer, before you continue, I was doing some research here, because remember, The Economist just said that Russia is about to enter a stagflation right now, which is something the USSR actually did around the 1980s or so. And just to give you an idea of the timeline, when the Soviet Union entered stagflation, like I said, it was around the 1980s, and then the Union fell in 1991. So about 10 or 11 years after stagflation set in, they collapsed, 10 years after that or so. So maybe that's like a guidebook here for what might happen with Russia today. I have a feeling it might actually be quicker with Russia today. Just my assumption. But Enforcer, what do you think? Is it going to happen faster or a little bit later?
Certainly faster, because this is a wartime scenario, and the Soviet Union was dealing with a wartime scenario in the invasion of Afghanistan from 79 to 89, but it was not the kind of intensity and spending adventure that the war in Ukraine is. It had a slow bleed on the Russian economy, but this is a fast bleed. And not only that, the Russian economy of today is not an internalized one like the Soviet Union was. The Soviet Union only traded with members of the Warsaw Pact, and that was about it. So largely, most of the trading and economic growth that happened in the Soviet Union happened inside of their own borders. So with that being completely different, and all of Russia's economic growth these days happening outside of their borders because of trading, these sanctions and all of the damage that's happening to the Russian economy right now is being done at a hyper speed. It's not being done at a slower pace like it was through the Cold War. They're dying at literally a speed running clip at this point economically.
And also, someone said, what is stagflation again? Stagflation is the combination of economic stagnation and also rapid inflation. Once again, the inflation rate inside of Russia right now, I believe, is about 10%, which is insanely high. And also, there's a ton of economic stagnation because of the war having a negative impact and the sanctions setting in. So stagflation is 100% going to set in, probably in about a month or so, according to economists. So it's literally following a very similar track as to what the Soviet Union did before it fell. And I would actually agree. I would say that this stagflation and also the collapse is going to come a lot sooner this time because of, like you said, the wartime economy, and also money moving faster these days and things sort of moving a little bit quicker in economies around the world. So it probably is going to be faster, probably a few years at best.
I would agree. Also, Matthew, how many questions have we gotten at this point? 1, 2, or 3?
Just one.
Oh, and so with that, I thank you once again for support, James Hughes, and I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one. But a huge thanks to you once again. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so our next one here is going to go to Jenna, last name Toll. She puts in a $50 donation, and thank you very much, Jenna, for that support. And Jenna's a dude. Thank you very much for that $50 support. They said, got married. I'll be changing my last name to Talia. And take one from the chat.
Yeah, get it, Jenna, Talia.
I got it in the
that's
chat earlier. I was
hilarious.
like, what the hell does this mean? At first I said, congrats. I was like, oh, look, they got married. And I was like, I read it the second time. I was like, hey, wait a minute. I was like, oh, hey. I was like, hey, it was good.
Hey, wait a minute. You didn't get married. That's another joke. But beyond that, I gotta thank you so much for the support, Genitals, and hoping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And I gotta say, a big thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And that was a pretty good one. It actually got me for a quick second, like when I read it, and then I read it back again, and I was like, I was like, I get it now. I get it now. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we will grab a live chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the live chat question is going to go to, let's see, Bullseye Bob. And the Bullseye Bob, he said, does Ukraine have the technology to hijack Russian drones in flight? And yes, they do. They can spoof them, actually. But we don't know if that's what happened here in the Romania situation. But Enforcer, what say you?
Yes, technically they can, and Matthew is right. That's called spoofing them, and that's also called there's another thing called spoofing, but we're not going to go into that on air. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for asking such an interesting question. But like Matthew said, we don't know if they were using spoofing when they hit Romania. Aw, man, Romania. Aw, man.
That boy knows a thing or two about Romania because he's seen a thing or two.
Also, I like how Romania is the only country in Europe that named themselves after Rome, because their name, Romania, is, after Rome, the city of Rome, from the Roman Empire. And what is the craziest thing about that is that hardly, if any, of modern-day Romania was a part of the Roman Empire at any point. It's a really weird thing to name your country when it wasn't even, like, a part of Rome. I don't know why they did it. Like, I'll be honest, it's like, they could have called themselves, just, well, Transylvania is only one region in the Carpathians, but they could have called themselves something a little bit more interesting, than trying to be Romania. That's like the Holy Roman Empire. It's like it has nothing to do with the Roman Empire at all. And then they were like, let's call ourselves Romania. And I was like, why? It's like why? Why do that? It's like Hungary calling themselves Hungary, and no one in that country's hungry. Like, it's like, it doesn't make any sense, like, at all, really, to me, like, just being honest.
You know who lives in Romania? Oh, who's the most unlike person who lives in Romania, by the way? Who do you think it is?
Andrew Tate.
Yes, you got it right, Ralph, with that.
What car
it's
is your
Andrew
Bugatti?
Tate. What car is your Bugatti? I don't know. I'm not here doing bad things to people. So I don't have a Bugatti, but, it's Tate.
You gotta have no moral compass and then act like you now have one when it's going to make you the most money. That's just what anyone would do. Like, really. But also, someone said, I'm proud of Romania. Yeah, Romania is a pretty neat country. I'm just kidding around about the name. But that actually is what the name of Romania means, at least in English. Also, another thing is Bulgaria. I don't know about y'all, but I always thought of I don't know what I used to think. I've always thought that Bulgaria was kind of a weird name,
It reminds me of beef bulgogi, that Korean dish.
I don't know how you remember that dish, but yeah, it kind of does now that you bring that up. Also, another one, turkey. They don't make the turkeys for Thanksgiving. Why are they called that? Why are they here? What's going on?
No. It's called Turkaya.
Also, I heard that Syria does not sear cooking pans, because I've never heard Gordon Ramsay look at Syria and say, "You're cooking in a burnt pan," or something like that. Like, never.
Well,
heard
I heard that Iraq isn't exactly the best place anymore because there's not much rocking going on there. It's just a lot of bad things happening now. I don't even know where I was going with that one. I just gave up on it midway through.
Also, another one is what is Leb, and why is it anonymous? Why is that a
that's
thing?
stretching. That's as bad as the Iraq one I just did.
But also, Matthew, there's a country literally below that one that says it's real.
Well, it's real. That's for sure.
Man, you get you're like, is Israel real? And then they're like, dude, is real. It's like, okay, I got you. It's like I don't understand. And then there's just some guy called Jordan down there. I just don't get it. I don't get the names. And then there's some country called the United States of America instead of the United States of North America. Just makes no sense, really. Like, none of it makes sense. And then there's a country called Canada. I don't even know what Ada is. Like, what I know what a can is. I don't even think they had cans when that country was founded. But anyways.
Hey, look, it's the Hudson Bay up there. Isn't there where that guy landed that plane? Like when he crashed it, he landed in the Hudson Bay.
Yeah, I think he did. It was like the Hudson Bay or the Hudson Lake or something like that. Yeah,
all those New Yorkers came out to save him out of the Hudson Bay.
Yeah, I think so. And look, Matthew, here's this place up here in Canada. It's new. It's a newfound land. What should we call it?
Isn't that where the Labrador dog came from? Right there in the Labrador. Hey, look, it's the Inuits. It's those mercenaries are hanging out up here.
Man, look at that. It's those Inuit mercenaries. And also, I like Happy Valley Goose Bay. Like, that sounds like some sort of like a show dog name right there.
Yeah, it kind of does. It sounds like what those dog, like, puppy mill places, like, called dogs when they sell them or stuff like that. They're like Happy Valley Goose Corgi or something like that. It's like, huh? It's like, how'd you come up with that?
Yeah, it's like, what the hell? But anyways, we're going to move on from this crappy joke segment.
Also, I'm joking about the Hudson River thing, by the way. I know the Hudson Bay is not the thing. I see some people getting crazy in the live chat. I was joking. It was supposed to be a joke.
The Hudson River's right here. This is where he landed the plane. I believe he took off from JFK, struck some birds, and then... Wait, hang on. Did he take off from Newark or from JFK or LaGuardia? Which one did he take off from?
I think he took off from LaGuardia.
Yeah, I think he did, because he flew up here somewhere, and I think he hit the birds, and he tried to spin back around, and he couldn't, and then that's when he landed in the Hudson River. Like, listen, folks, when we make jokes like this, and it sounds too stupid to believe, it is too stupid to believe. They're jokes. Like, don't take them seriously, because I see some people like, you are half stupid, and I'm like, no, it's like, we're just kidding around, we're just a little goofing, you know? Like, you're gonna beat up a little silly guy? Like, what the hell? But anyways, moving on from that, also, they have an entire town, apparently, in New Jersey called Gutenberg. I guess named after the guy who created the printing press. Like, no joke there. But anyways, moving on from that, it is time for us to get into the final question of this segment. But still, thank you once again, Jenna, last name Talia. See what I did there for the support and help with the show to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're getting right back into the news.
All right, so our last one of the segment goes to, not for one, but for all, Ukraine, who puts in a $22 donation. And thank you very much, not for one, but for all Ukraine for that support. And they said, thank you, boys, for all the effort, and I'll catch y'all tomorrow. And shout out to my airborne grandpa from the 82nd, and Ace from the 101st. And also, I love you, birds. And long live the LSA, and get one from the chatty, please.
Hey, thank you so much for the support. Not for one, yet for all, Ukraine. And thank you so much for enjoying the effort. And I gotta say, thank you so much for being with this channel for a long time. Folks like you have made this thing possible for a very, very long time through your support in words and your support through Super Chats. You've helped us been able to pay the bills and keep the lights on, and no one has to do either of those things, either watch this channel or even support it. But nevertheless, y'all do, and we're always honored and appreciative of that. And of course, thank you so much once again for giving a shout out to, and I want to make sure that I get that right, because I don't want to mistake that, your airborne grandpa from the 82nd, and an Ace from the 101st. And thank you so much for loving the birds. We love the birds as well. They're great. I think they're wonderful. And also, long live the Lee Spring Army. And we will get one last question from the chat and then move right back into the news. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our live chat question here is going to go to John Bobek. And he said, how many oil refineries are left that weren't hit by drones?
Well, there's a considerable amount of them, actually. But the thing is that we're not looking for the complete destruction of all refineries in Russia and them being taken offline. It's about percentages. And right now, there's about 15 to 20% of all the refineries in Russia are offline. Refineries exist largely working at 100% capacity or close to that most of the time. The amount of refineries in the country generally is close to the amount of fuel. There's usually a slight deficit there that country consumes on a daily basis, and they're able to produce that amount of fuel products on a daily basis. And also sometimes they buy a little extra globally, or they produce a little extra if the energy demand is low, and then they store that in strategic fuel reserves. For the Russian Federation right now, because of the amount of refineries that have been knocked out, we're assuming that the fuel attrition rate is around 800 to 1 million barrels of oil per day, which is incredibly high and something that would not be sustainable for a very long period of time without seeing massive inflation of fuel costs inside of Russia due to the relative scarcity of fuel products like that. So with that, I hope that does address that live chat well, and I hope that also gives an idea that we're not looking for, you know, over 50% of the refineries to be destroyed. 20% is in fact a perfect number as far as we're concerned with the attrition rate that the Russians are facing. 30% would be insane. 20% is incredibly good. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And moving on out of the question segment and on into Belarus, we were able to see that trenches have been built. We've been able to see that the Belarusians are beginning to build these around 6 kilometers away from the Belarusian-Lithuanian border near to a training ground. But it has been given some concern that this may be preparations for a possible defensive scenario put forward by the Belarusians if a conventional war was to break out with the Russian Federation against NATO. But moving on from that, we have been able to hear that a lot of people have been talking about Peskov's statements, as Russia said it doesn't expect a change in U.S. foreign policy toward Ukraine, despite diplomatic peace talks. And a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts, and a lot of people believe that the Russians have abandoned peace talks entirely before the attempt was even made. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so 55% said Russia's abandoned peace talks, while 24% said Peskov was just yapping again, and 15% said Russia is just threatening the United States. And honestly, I don't think Russia's totally abandoned their peace talks just yet, but certainly they are backing off of their really gung-ho attitude toward going into peace talks with the new administration, because they're catching wind of the plan to destroy their economy. So that's not going over well with Peskov and the gang, including Horseman, Lavrov. But it looks like Peskov is probably just yapping again, and they're trying to threaten the USA to make the new admin think that they're about to withdraw from the peace negotiations, and they're hoping that's going to scare him into maybe changing his views a little bit, which it's probably not. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say the Russian Federation is most likely abandoned peace talks, hearing about what the incoming administration is about to be doing anyways. So for that reason, they're not even going to attempt them. They're just going to let the economy and military collapse around them and then try and return to it about a year's time from now when it's honestly too late. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And it's now time for us to move on into Ukraine, where we have been able to hear that the United States has funded Ukraine's drone program. Y'all remember that guy? That guy that I'm totally not holding a grudge against, but kind of am, who was on that United 24 video, who was saying, America, it just isn't good. We were actually funding that guy's little factory, apparently, because the United States has pretty much funded a shadow operation in the background, pretty much keeping the entirety of Ukraine's drone industry alive, with an additional $1.5 billion in funds sent in September of 2024 alone. So it appears that the United States is still doing its part in supporting the Ukrainian war effort and making sure to keep putting the Russians at bay, whether the Ukrainians, like in that United 24 video, really know where the money is coming from or not. But great to know that the United States is helping out in those anti-Russian efforts still and making sure to support American and Western interests. Moving on from that and into the Kursk Oblast, we also got to see that unfortunately a Ukrainian supply truck was hit today. It actually appears to be an American supply truck, but we do show casualties inside the Kursk Oblast whenever they occur on the Ukrainians to kind of give a bit more of a balanced assessment of what the offensive is looking like in this area. And we can see the supply truck right here. We can see the fiber optic drone trying to make it in without severing its link. So we can see it once again flying around. It's almost like walking around, to be entirely honest.
It's also crazy how the cable doesn't get, caught up on the trees and everything.
Yeah, it is a little weird. They're just scooting it in. And there's the supply truck. Once again, you can see it's largely one of the more modern American supply trucks. Unfortunately, I don't know the specific designation of them. But moving on from that and into our next one, we also got to see what a Russian village currently on the active front line in this area looks like right now as well from a drone view. And it's completely destroyed. Very unfortunate to see. The Russian Federation apparently leveled the town through a large amount of artillery barrages, attempting to drive the Ukrainians out. Somehow the Ukrainians are still holding this town, although there's really no defensible structures left standing. But still, it does show the complete severity and damage that the Russians will even leverage against their own villages in occupied territory to try and push the Ukrainians out. Here is why Russian artillery is the worst in the world.
Partially because they can't aim worth two shits.
Secondly, because the Russians are cross-eyed. The most cross-eyed in the world.
And third, because they're partially drunk on hardcore vodka 24/7 of the time.
And what's even crazier is that Ukrainian vodka, not Russian vodka, is the best in the world.
If only they could have our vodka, they could aim to the moon.
That was actually pretty good. That sounded exactly like him, honestly.
Oh, man. I don't know where they found that narrator, man, but they're not helping their case for that narrator.
Number 15, Burger King foot lettuce. The last thing you want in your Burger King burger is somebody's foot. You know that guy at Chills,
Yes.
Man, honestly, though, he's kind of gotten legendary status because he just kept at it for so long. It's just expected at default these days.
Yeah, I think so, pretty much. Duncan VR said, is Russian vodka made with oil? I mean, it could be. You don't know what's in Russian, liquor at this point. It could be anything. They're getting a little desperate.
Man, they are getting desperate. Here is why Russians use oil to create their vodka, which is the worst in the world. It's such a... And that's, we actually see them continuing to show the damage to this village.
Man,
Man.
they really ripped this one up.
Tore that thing up. I'm a so tear that thing up, my boy. But anyways, moving on from that clip and out of that area and on to the next one, we also were able to see them firing at some Russians in the Kursk Oblast. If it loads. And it did. Let's check it out. Okay, I don't know what that was. Sounded like a cop car, maybe. I didn't do nothing. But we can see the Ukrainians advancing on the Russians. It appears with a Bradley. Also, the skull's very romantical.
Man, that thing's looking romantical.
Here is why Ukrainian skulls are the most romantic in the world, or something like that.
Man, I like it how, you'll just say, or something like that, when you don't know where you're going with the joke. Or something like that.
Man, it's just a great way to end it. It's a be-all, catch-all.
Or something like that.
Yeah, or something like that, it's just something like that, You never know. And we can see the Bradley continuing to fire onto the Russians, really just doing a drive-by shooting, actually, which is interesting. T.M. Martin said, romantical? Yeah, that's a joke from this skit, where there was it was like this TV show, and this guy was in jail, and he was like, I don't like it in here, get me out, and he was like on a video call, and then this guy came into his cell, and he was like, I need you to come here and kiss me on my hot mouth. I'm feeling romantical. And since then, we've been saying romanical. It's romantic, that's proper English. But I hope that explains the joke and where it comes from, in case you're like, what the hell is romanical? Is he, stupid? Is he from the South? Can he not speak English? Which, we're from the South, and we kind of can't speak English. But, still, it is a joke. It's a prank, bro. Trust me, bro. Let's see. Also, Matthew, I forgot to include that story tonight.
I was putting the poll out there. I was wondering if it was coming up. Is that story right there? We got to touch that one. We got to touch on that one.
We'll go to the Twitter here later on after we get through the frontline footage, and I'll just get it from there, because I actually forgot to include that, because I was trying to make sure that I had a couple of other things before the stream that I thought I included but didn't, like the Russian casualty report, and I didn't have them, so I had to spend that time to include those. But moving on from that and into the next clip, we did get to see the Ukrainians training with shotguns. That's actually a Mossberg 550 right there with a heat shield that this guy is using. Pretty nice. I think they're pretty cool. I actually have one of these, and they're not bad. But moving on from that and into the next clip, we also were able to see them repairing some tanks from the front lines, behind the lines. Look at them. They're making sure to clean these things up and get them ready for frontline service again, with an angle grinder and all. Mr. Sawzall knows all. Moving on from that now to that little clip, and on to our next one, we also got to see a Susanna SPG. Look at that thing hiding in the pines like an absolute G. Love to see it. Hopefully it does very good work. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a good Ukrainian drone evasion and hit. Also, I don't know why this woman down here is wanting to ban ticks. I personally think ticks are a great parasite, but we could see the drone coming on in, looking at the burning vehicle. It does a flip. Whoa. Epic. And then it goes in and takes out the second vehicle. Boom! It hits it dead in the trailer, knocking that thing out, my boy. Hey, Masu! Knock the thing out, my boy! But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also get to see some pretty cool pictures of these Ukrainian soldiers standing in front of a T-80. And also petting a dog. And also standing in front of a muddy car. And also this pilot. It's just cool pictures. Moving on from that, though, we also got to see the Russian casualty report. And holy moly, the casualty report was juicy.
They got 2 Bobcat skid steers today. That is crazy. It's the only loss in the right side column, which is crazy to see. I'm glad they remembered me. But Enforcer, tell us more.
Ole mole! And I gotta say, losses were incredible. Ms. Disa, the keeper of the record, said that 1,670 troops is an average range, and the 19th highest daily loss, tied with December 4th of 2024. 124 vehicles ranks as the 7th highest loss, tied with November 14th of 2024, and artillery losses are below average and at the same low level as January 1st and 3rd. But moving through the entirety of the report, we have 1,670 Russian soldiers wounded and killed in the past 24 hours, along with 13 APCs, 124 supply trucks. They were just one number away from me saying 1, 2, 3, and it's as easy as A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. But moving on from that, we also have 12 main battle tanks destroyed, 4 artillery pieces, 63 drones, and 2 Bobcat skid steers. The numbers were bussin'. But you know what else was bussin'? Russian soldiers to the front lines, and the Ukrainians were knocking them out fast. Check it out. Oh, Bliet! They're coming for us. Run, Bliet! And it looks like they ain't bussin' no more. It looks like they running. Oh!
It's the clown car. They're jumping out in mass and taking off for the circus.
You know, Matthew, I heard that the Russians weren't good at stealth. You know why?
Why?
Because when they walk, the horns in their clown shoes go off. They go, and so it's like, the Russians are here. I sense it. Here is why Russians are the worst at stealth in the world.
And also the sound of clanking vodka bottles also gives it away as well.
Man, also the it gives it away as well, a pretty good amount. But moving on down to Kupiansk, we also got to see the Ukrainians firing at the Russians in the Kupiansk direction with a grad. Aren't you glad to see this video?
Congratulations. Look at that guy like falling backwards and filming it. He's getting scared.
He's like, whoa! He's like, whoa! Man, I gotta say, I'm very glad to see that clip. But moving on from that and into our next clip further behind the lines, we also get to see a military hospital overcrowded. I'm not going to show a lot of that clip. If y'all want to see that, click on the link in the description below for the map and check it out, because some of the wounds that some of those people sustained were maybe not good enough for YouTube. You know, they have very stringent standards. But moving on from that and down towards the area of Kremenna, we also got to see some Russians being taken out down here. Check it out. The Ukrainians walk up to the Russian dugout and they're like, "Hey, Masu, give up, my boy," and they didn't. So they started taking them out. Oh, a little pop right there.
Yikes.
Oh, a little pop. Man, the new rapper's gonna pop up. They're gonna be called Little Pop.
I think the rapper's name is Top.
Man, a Little Top. Why are you calling Little Top? Man, because I spin round and round. It's like, okay, it's like the wheels on the bus or something, I guess. I don't know. But anyways, moving on from that. And out of that area, it's very nice to see. We're now going to be moving on to a clip a little bit further behind the lines where we got to see an M113 on the move. All right, we're going to be muting the music. Should have known that.
Hey, look, this was on TikTok, that app that used to be. I remember when TikTok was a thing, kids.
It's that commie app. Oh, little explosion off to the side.
I wonder if we'll start seeing videos come off a red note from the Ukrainian battlefield.
Man, those videos, I heard, require a 20-second segment at the beginning of every short praising the great leader in the Chinese Communist Party. So I don't think we'll be getting a lot of those.
Probably not. Did you look at that? Look at that drift. Look at that.
Like, dang, dude, they're drifting that thing.
Trying to pop a tread off or something.
And here comes the Ukrainian main battle tank, just hanging out, kind of creeping, honestly, little creeper. And now the M113 is going to follow it. Also, I like that stuffed animal they got on the thing to the right side. Oh, and the tank's firing, and the M113 is following on forward. The tank leading the charge, and the clip ends. But still, a very interesting look into the area at the moment. Moving a little bit further on down and towards Bakhmut, we also got to see a Russian golf cart getting hit by an RPG, and the Ukrainians that did it filmed it. Well, actually, the aftermath of it. But here's the clip. There's the golf cart. Hey, look, the emergency flashers are on. Well, I guess Chinese golf carts are good for one thing, and that's letting people know when it got hit by an RPG.
Whoa, holy moly.
That was not a good camera angle, I'm not going to lie. But it's nice to see that they did take out that Russian golf cart. See, guys.
Man, that sounds like me. That sounds like me laughing sometimes at dude off in the corner.
Dude, he put out the most laughish laugh ever, man. He went, ha 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 ha. But see, folks, if they can laugh at it, we can laugh at it. That's the rule. Them's the rules. Moving on from that and down towards Toretsk, we also got to see them taking down some drones. We hear the fire. We can hear the drone. That little pesky bugger.
Підерський! По нам не розрив, 1 плюс стволки, як прийняв. Я в'їбав FPV, як прийняв.
Izov Brigade, they do it best.
And that's a great thing. It's a wonderful thing. Also, really quickly, I wanted to address someone. Someone said, "Hey, don't joke about Red Note. That's insulting to communist Chinese culture." I think that's one group I'm fine with insulting is the Communist Chinese Party. Just want to put that out there. Very rarely do I go out of my way to try and actually, like maybe say that I'm insulting something directly. Like if I ever make a joke about anything in America, it's a joke. It's not meant to insult. But I'm not going to hold punches on the Chinese Communist Party, because if our concern is let's not offend the communists which are trying to tear the United States down, I think we have our priorities backwards, just being entirely frank. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a Ukrainian soldier resting in Toretsk with a CZ Bren. Very nice way to rest, for sure. And I got to say, man, that CZ Bren, it's resting as well. It's getting ready to get to work. But moving on from that and towards Pokrovsk, we also got to see them taking out some drones. Playing that Interstellar music, mind you.
I was riding around in my Lincoln. You know, I was Matthew McConaughey in that movie, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Man, I think I do. I hardly remember Interstellar, to be entirely honest, except for that one scene where they drove through the cornfield and they grew that entire cornfield just for that scene.
Yes, that was impressive.
Oh!
Oh!
Oh! And that's the end of that clip right there. Very impressive. And moving on from that and further down the line to Robotny, we also got to see some Russian positions getting hit down here. There's one, 120mm mortar. They've been spotted. That's what that says. Also, Frostbright, that might be the case a little bit. That is a very lively community. TikTok was as well. Doesn't avoid the fact that it is a CCP run app. That's kind of the issue there, is that it's run by communists. So yes, might be lively, maybe, but it's also communist, and it's run by the Communist Chinese, which are a rival and adversary of the United States of America and an enemy to Western interests. So that's a bit of the...
Also, if you want to go test that theory, go on that platform, Red Book, Red Note, whatever it's called. Go over there and type up a bad incident that's happened in China's history that I can't even repeat on YouTube because I'm scared that YouTube's going to say something about it, and see how long it stays there on that app, and we'll see what happens.
And also, one other thing, try and see how the Chinese netizens react when you join Red Note and they run into you, because from what we've been hearing, it is not at all positive what is happening.
Racism jumping around on that app.
Yeah, it's straight up racism. People calling everyone coming in white devils, stuff like that. It's not a great place entirely. Largely because it's run by the Chinese Communist Party. That's really the main thing. But there's also other things that I've heard and seen on the internet already that are coming out about Red Note that's showing it's not necessarily the best thing. But anyways, we did get to see the soldier in the Kraken unit holding a cat. Also, I like that AK-74 with the GP-25 underneath. Really neat. Love to see that. I really do like the GP-25s. I just think they're neat. But moving on from that, we also get to see this guy with a PKP Pechnik machine gun. Really neat. We also get to see this guy sitting in another bunker, it seems, with another PKP Pechnik. And also, we got to see these fellas here. One of them with a CZ Bren, a classic. One of them with a AR-style rifle. And another one with an unidentified rifle. But still, very nice to see all of them hanging out and enjoying their time down there. But moving on from that and on up into Kyiv, it's now time for us to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1000, and that's where the Russian casualty report went. That's where it went. I labeled that address from the president. I must have been completely zoned out at that point when I did that, because there it was. I actually didn't miss it. It was in the middle of Kyiv. Let me go really quickly to the president of Ukraine's website, and let me go get the speech.
You see, he's messing up. Yeah, come on. Can you say it? Can you do it? I mean, come on, man.
And he doesn't even have a speech today, so it doesn't even look like I really missed it.
Come on, man. I was looking forward to a quick snack.
let me go to YouTube and let me go see if he has one, because times are getting tough these days, folks. We're always hungry behind the scenes, I'm not gonna lie. So let me see here. President of Ukraine. There we go. Now we ought to have one.
Дорогі,
No,
Oh,
don't you dare. Not yet. We're not ready.
дорогі українці,
Now we do have one for today. So with that, let me get all the subtitles popping up and everything. So, without further ado, folks, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. Peach! Peach!
Дорогі українці, українки, весь день тривали рятувальні роботи сьогодні в Кривому Розі. Після удару російської балістики 4 людини були вбиті цим ударом. Мої співчуття рідним та близьким. 14 людей були поранені. Їм надано необхідну допомогу. І таких ударів, таких втрат просто не було би вже, якби ми отримали всі необхідні системи ППО, про які ми так давно говоримо з партнерами, які є в світі. Провів сьогодні засідання Ставки. Питання різні, але загалом про нашу незалежність у зброї, виробництва дронів, ракетна програма, технологічні компоненти для армії, в тому числі роботизовані системи. Ми працюємо над більшими закупівлями та над більшими масштабами виробництва в Україні. Вдячний всім партнерам, які нам допомагають. Була сьогодні в Києві делегація словацьких парламентарів на чолі з Михайлом Шимечкою. Ми говорили про нашу співпрацю та, зокрема, в енергетиці. Ми готові до відкритої і чесної роботи зі Словаччиною, як з усіма партнерами заради енергетичної безпеки та більш комфортних цін на енергоносії. Зараз деякі діячі розповсюджують багато дезінформації, але після того, як терміни російського транзиту просто закінчились, реальність проста. Тільки відносини з партнерами Європи та власна робота на енергетичну незалежність можуть допомогти Європі. Треба працювати для наших народів, а не для Москви. Я радий, що словацька сторона, як ми почули сьогодні на перемовинах, це підтримує. Тим більше перед стартом нової американської політики президента Трампа щодо постачання значно більших обсягів енергоресурсів на світовий ринок. Сьогодні ж зустрівся з керівництвом Міністерств закордонних справ країн Південно-Східної Європи. Ми говорили про взаємну підтримку, про нашу безпеку, про нашу економіку, людський капітал, наші відносини в рамках Євросоюзу і НАТО. Вони точно знають, що таке загроза дестабілізації з боку Росії і знають, що необхідно для спільного захисту. Ще одне. Відзначив державними нагородами наших воїнів, хлопців, десантників та воїнів сил спеціальних операцій, які взяли в полон перших північно-корейських солдатів. Вручив їм ордени та передав орден «Золота зірка» Герою України мамі старшого солдата Дмитра Масловського, позивний «Кобра», 71-ша окрема єгерська бригада. Хлопець, який героїчно загинув в бою з окупантом на Донеччині. Багато хто бачив відео цього бою. Це була взірцева хоробрість українського воїна. Вічна йому пам'ять і шана. І всім нашим героям, всім нашим людям, які віддали своє життя, щоб Україна жила. Слава Україні!
And
Hiram Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1059 of the war. And that is moving us on into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. And boy, howdy, can we not wait. I've got to thank everyone who's been here tonight, all 8,000 people who were here at the peak, and the 44,000 people who've watched so far for watching this stream. It was a little bit smaller than we were anticipating. We thought that a lot of people were going to show up for the massive news that happened today inside of NATO. But nevertheless, we are still happy to have everyone here, because 8,000 people is a lot of people to have here at a single time. But with that in mind, it is time for us to move on into the next segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of of y'all. But before we move on into that, I do have to make sure to grab something from Twitter because it is a big
I
piece
sent you
of
the
news.
link. I sent you the link in Discord DMs.
Oh, Matthew, we must do it live. F it, we'll do it live! We've got to... Oh, hey, look at that. I've actually seen this before. I've seen this system. It's really cool.
Yeah, I like that. Real advanced, by the way. It's like looking at people from like a neon perspective or something.
Here is why Ukrainian infrared systems are the best in the world. And then it shows an
That's
American
because
system.
they get it from the United States.
Yeah, because we get it from America, and then we get a false sense of superiority. But anyways, moving on from that, let me go down here. Let's see here. Hang on. That was a cool picture, by the way. One of the few NATO AWACS that there are. But let's see here.
It's the one with the chart.
We have to be able to find, let's see here. Hang on. Here we go. Here it is. Now it is time to go through the news. The European Union is to buy recorded volumes of Russian LNG, which is liquid natural gas, according to Politico, citing Kepler data. Despite the cessation of pipeline gas transit, the EU continues to buy LNG delivered by tankers from Russian ports. At the same time, 95 to 96% of Russian gas comes to Europe from the Yamal plant. According to analysts, in the first 15 days of 2025, 27 European countries imported a record 837,300 metric tons of LNG from Russia. In the same period last year, 760,100 metric tons were imported. So as you can see, Europe is actually buying more liquid natural gas from the Russian Federation now than it did at any point in recent history, which is very interesting considering the sanctions that are imposed on Russian oil and natural gas. And a lot of people have been talking about this, and a lot of people have begun to say that the European Union just doesn't want to pay for more gas or more money for the same amount of gas. Some others said it doesn't care if it hurts Ukraine, the European Union. Some people say, well, they really have no options. Not like the United States is a major producer of natural gas or anything. And some others are unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so 39% said the EU does not want to pay more for their gas, while 30% said the EU doesn't care if it hurts Ukraine, and 22% said they really have no other option to get natural gas. And like the enforcer just mentioned, the United States is a humongous producer of LNG, and the incoming admin has offered to sell it to them at a good rate. So they have other options. They simply are not taking the option. But they were presented with two options here. They said, get your gas cheaper or help Ukraine. And they said, you know what? We want cheaper gas. Screw Ukraine. That's basically what they said by taking that decision right here. I know that sounds a little bit crude, but that's basically what it is in reality. So even though there's massive U.S. sanctions on the gas and the oil, the EU, at least 27 of the EU countries apparently do not care. And they've even increased how much they're getting from Russia, even after Ukraine shut down the pipeline from Russia all the way to Europe. So makes no sense to me, and it honestly pisses me off a little bit, because it's basically reversing what we're doing. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that it's incredibly annoying and makes no sense because the United States is undoubtedly the major oil and natural gas producer of the world. We produce more oil than anyone else. We produce more natural gas than anyone else. Therefore, for those reasons, it should be cheaper to get it from the United States or equally priced. But nevertheless, they continue to go with Russian oil even with sanctions. It is continuing to fund the Russian Federation and their war effort to continue to buy gas from them. It's a crazy thing, to be entirely honest, and I'm absolutely shocked that the European Union continues to purchase a large amount of oil and natural gas from the Russian Federation. So that would be my honest take. Not a great thing. This is horrendous. And saying that they have no other choice, that's ridiculous. They have plenty of other choices. They just continue to go with Russia because it's the most convenient. And I thought, I just wanted to say this really quickly. I thought that Europe was all for Ukraine. So why in the world are they buying gas from Russia that is giving the Russians money to keep killing Ukrainians with? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so jumping right back into our super chat questions, our first one here is going to go to Gunfox, who has just turned into Gunfox. No 61 and no Medic Fox. I don't know what happened with that, but thank you very much, Gunfox, for that $20 support and helping to keep us running. He puts in a day in history. He said January the 29th of 1964, the SA-5 launched PAB LC-39B, first flight of live second stage, and first orbital flight for the May 1989 STS-30 launch LC-39B landed at Edwards Shuttle Atlantis Magellan Venus probe deployment. And question from the chat.
I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say, thank you for including that little day in space history. It's always very interesting to hear about the things that happen on this very day in our U.S. space history. And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and sharing that with us. I gotta say that there's a whole bunch of interesting things that deal with U.S. space exploration inside the United States. But one of the most interesting places, as many people would know, is Cape Canaveral, or the John F. Kennedy Space Center, which is a part of Cape Canaveral. But this place is incredibly cool because this is where most of the rocket launches in the United States occur. There are a couple of other places where they happen, but not as much as Cape Canaveral. But it's just so cool to look at this place. I mean, look at this. This is a Space Force base right here. This is Space Force.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, like most of the Air Force's space operations and the Navy's got transferred over to the Space Force. So now instead of it being the Cape Canaveral, I think it was Naval Air Station or the Air Force Base, it's now a Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, which is pretty cool. Also, let's see here. One second, I'm trying to see if I can find something else interesting here. I guess we just have to go to the launch pads. You can actually see the launch complexes. Pretty cool. Love this place. It's a really interesting place. Never got to see it in real life, but one day I hope to. And I believe, Matthew, that there is a chance that we could see it in real life, because if I am not mistaken, there is a Brightline station near to here. Is there, Matthew? Let's go look at the Brightline map.
Zoom out a bit on the map, I can tell you.
But I want to look for the Brightline map. I want to look for the map. Here we go. Yeah, actually, it does look like there is one somewhere around there.
Yeah, must be.
Yeah, well, there's got to be. Let's see. But wait a minute. That's goofy. They have no stations beyond West Palm Beach. So it's literally just a straight shot from there to Orlando. That makes no sense. Then it makes no sense at all. It's like you have all this track here where you could do quick stop commuter services as well as high speed expresses from from that area, West Palm Beach, up to Orlando. Why in the world would you skip out on that? I mean, there's like Port St. Lucie. You could build a station there. You could build a station at Melbourne. You could build a station at Port St. John and Cocoa West. But they don't. They just, it's a straight shot to Orlando at that point. That makes no sense.
Also, they're not building any of those stations you're talking about. Like, those aren't being built. But they are building one to Walt Disney World. Like, it's going to stop at Walt Disney World itself.
Yeah, I have to say that actually is pretty cool. And I wonder if they're going to integrate that with the monorail system at Disney World, because that would be really cool if you get dropped off in the same station that a monorail could pick you up from, if they made an extension like that. I wonder where that station is going to be on the Disney property. Is it going to be here?
I have no idea.
Man, I have no idea either. Like, I was looking at that, I was like, I don't really think it would be. I think it's already built or being built right now, if I remember correctly, that one. Because they already have the Orlando, let's see, Brightline Orlando station. Here it is. At the airport? Convenient.
It's at the airport.
Yeah,
that is convenient.
That is really convenient because, dude, that is genius. You can fly into Orlando and get on the train and go pretty much straight to Miami at that point.
Yeah, that's pretty neat, man.
Yeah, that's pretty freaking cool. Hey, by the way, here's what Brightline trains look like right here. You see
It's like those European trains, like the same type of coach cars.
Yeah, it really is nice. And you know what's crazy, Matthew, is that Brightline and Amtrak. You know, when we were on the Amtrak trains and I was telling you all about the new ACS 44 Chargers, Brightline uses the same thing. Like, actually, crazily enough, the Brightline trains are Chargers. These right here with the sleek front cone, literally the same locomotive as Amtrak uses. So let me see here. Let me see if I can show you this.
I think I heard the other day that one of those had crashed in Florida into like a truck that was sitting on the rails or something like that. It looked like it held up in the crash pretty well from based on the footage I saw.
Let's see here. Here's the Simmons Charger. Let me go get the one that we were on. And they usually do hold up very well, locomotives do, because they're incredibly heavy. Their frames are usually built pretty much to be extra duty heavy, so that way the locomotives can produce good traction. So generally the metal that they're made of is so strong, there's really not a good way to be able to, bust through them or really damage them much. But this is Amtrak's ALC-42. I said ACS, is actually the ALC-42 Charger right here. Notice the engine vents on the back, Matthew, this giant one that's octagonally shaped with the giant X-beam through it.
Yes.
So if you look at the Brightline locomotives, they have the exact same ventilation, because the actual body, well, at least the diesel-electric body area of the locomotives are identical. The only thing that's different in between Brightline's Chargers and Amtrak's Chargers is the nose design. Amtrak made theirs to where the front coupler was easily accessible, along with all of the other access hoses that allow for brake pressure, electricity connection, and all that. They allow for them to be easily accessible from the front. Brightline didn't, because they operate their Chargers as multiple units, so they never detach from any other running cars. It's just run as a unit and taken on and offline as a unit. So they shroud.
Better get used to Brightline, because it sounds like Amtrak's going bye-bye.
I've heard that a little bit. I don't think it's going to go completely bye-bye. I think they'll probably just have funding cut to, back to what it used to be, like where they're going, spare change, ma'am. And they'll probably be back to that, which is kind of sad. But Brightline sounds like it's doing really well in Florida. Every time any public reports are made about them, they're doing better and better each year with ridership and such things. So it's great to hear that, and it's good to know, because they actually do run pretty decent services. It's just that it's not the old kind of American service. I would actually say it's more like an imported European kind of a railroad service at this point, because they have no dining car, and they also don't have any sleepers because the travel times are so short. So, kind of an interesting thing with that. But anyways, I hope that does address that somewhat well with the whole thing, because I had to find a way to make rocketry gunfox about trains. I don't know why I do that, but I do. Also, there's one of the Brightline trains that collided with a fire truck, interestingly enough, in Florida, which is very interesting. And that thing actually did hold up quite well from that.
Yeah, and a fire truck's no slouch either. So between the fire truck and the train, looks like the train won.
The train will always win for the large part, almost every time. They're just that heavy. Like, let me go see if I can get you the weight on one of these things, because it's insane. Let's see here. The weight. Go break.
Also, by the way, don't forget, Gunfox did ask for a live chat question.
Oh, and we will get that. So this locomotive weighs 260,000 pounds, just the locomotive, not the entire train. So you have two of those on a Brightline train, two locomotives on each train. So it's a collective about 520,000 pounds of weight, just in between the locomotives. And then you also have to include the rolling stock, how many other passenger cars that they have on board, which also weigh a good bit. So all of that is bearing down on anything in front of the train. So if it hits, they're wiping something out. I mean, there's just no question about that. Anything in front of a train is going to be wiped out. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somehow fairly well. Gunfuck said, I'm not shocked. I wouldn't be either, because somehow I've been doing this pretty decently, and it's become a trend and a tradition of the channel. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And Matthew, what do we have for a live chat?
All right, so the live chat question is going to go to David Long, who says, a question for later. And it turns out it's a question for now. He said, Matt, you are the president of NATO, or the secretary of NATO, and the enforcer is the president of the United States. How would you use your position differently than what is currently being done on the war? And I will say that for the position of the Secretary of NATO, there's really honestly not much they have the power to do outside of trying to influence the NATO members to basically follow in the footsteps of what the United States wants them to do. So it's essentially a political role. So in other words, the most I could do in that role if I was put there is try to convince the countries within NATO is to bump up their spending to at least 2% to meet the guidelines. And outside of just telling them to do that, there's really not much teeth I can add to it. So honestly, it's an important position because, of course, there has to be a leader of NATO, like a figurehead of NATO. But at the same time, there's really not much they really do in reality. So my hands are tied. But Enforcer, what would you do?
I would have to say as the president, I would go with the plan that we laid out yesterday, which is to really give the Ukrainians large abilities to strike and destroy Russian economic abilities, heavily sanction the Russian Federation, and make sure the Russians are not able to make any ground until their economy collapses and they're either forced to the negotiating table or they give up. In a short sense, that's what the plan is. But also, Gunfox wanted me to rabbit hole on the Apollo program. So I'm actually going to circle back really quickly, just so that way the whole thing wasn't on trains, and talk about the Apollo program for a little bit of a brief moment, because it was probably the most successful program ever conducted in NASA's history. Well, of course, the Space Shuttle program easily could be a contender, but as far as the accomplishments that the Apollo program achieved, I don't believe there's been any equal to that yet. That's the only one that allowed for human beings to walk on the face of a foreign object, like the moon outside of Earth. So a fairly cool thing when you think about it. But the Apollo project was the accumulation of loads and loads of efforts over the course of 1961 all the way up to 1972. And of course, didn't just involve the Saturn V, but involved a decent amount of projects that were trying to work their way towards actually landing on the moon, with, of course, Apollo 11 being the first one that was successful. But one thing that is incredibly interesting is that in 2023 figures, the Apollo program cost $257 billion to undertake, which is a pretty massive undertaking, by the way, $257 billion. But that's wild to think that NASA had got that kind of funding back in the day. Because what is NASA's budget this year? NASA budget
Nothing close.
2023, $25 billion. So they would need about 10 times the funding that they're getting right now this last year to be able to even pull off just the Apollo project alone. And they had loads of other projects going on at the time outside the Apollo program as well. That's just wild, man. Like, we used to actually be a country that spent on other things rather than, let's see, what is it? Let me think. The military, and the next biggest thing, well, actually all their non-discretionary spending, which is, pretty much just Social Security and welfare programs. Back in the day, we actually used to fund other stuff rather than those big three things. But to be entirely honest, it really isn't an option with Social Security and also welfare projects, because those are non-discretionary funding prerogatives. So it's not something that you can negotiate or really cut down a lot. It's something that you're pretty much required to spend on by act of Congress. But anyways, this is impressive. And also, the first crewed, let's see, SA-1, you were talking about SA-2, weren't you, Gunfox? Because I think SA-1 and SA-2 used the same rockets, and it was the, let me go look at SA-2. Let me go, SA-2. Czechoslovakian submachine gun. That thing's ugly. We're going to move back from that and go back to the SA-1, because if I'm correct, Gunfox 61, this was testing the different stages of the Saturn
SA-5.
SA-5. Let's go take a look at the let's see, the Saturn 1. Let's see. Maybe it will be included under the Saturn 1B, I would assume. Let's see here. Saturn 1B. Where in the world is the SA-5? Where's the SA-5? You know what? I'm just going to type it in. I'm just going to type in Saturn SA-5. Saturn 1. And there we go. And let me see if I can find this here. Also, this thing didn't look at all like a space exploration vehicle, at least according to the model. That looks like a freaking nuclear warhead on top of this thing, man. Like, it looks like we're going to launch this thing at the Soviets. I like how this guy is in the middle of the picture, because, he has no questionable background whatsoever, and he's just looking at a rocket that's flying into space, and he's going, wow, what a rocket. You know who that guy is, Matthew, don't you?
Yes, I do. That's Werner von Braun.
And that's JFK.
That is JFK. That was JFK. But also, I guess the German fellow just finished out his dreams. He built the rocket they were wanting to build the whole time. It looks nuclear, like you said.
Yeah, he's like, this thing will destroy the Soviet. I mean, it will destroy. It would explore space. That's always what we wanted to do. He's like that guy from Doctor Strangelove. I forgot his name.
I like how on the side of that picture right there of that rocket, it has like one of those like thumb like nut bolt things. You see that right there on the side? It's like one of those screwed nut bolt things. That's like something you'd use on like a garden tool or something like that.
Dude, honestly, it kind of does look like. Honestly, there's a lot of stuff that's on this rocket. Additionally, that you don't really see on the final Saturn 1B. I wonder what they were for, because I'm sure that those are actual modeled things that did exist on the rocket. But beyond that, this is a fairly interesting, in Saturn 1B at least, because Gunfox did clarify it was testing the different stages of the Saturn 1B, which was the predecessor to the Saturn V, which was generally trying to test out some of the things that the Saturn V was going to complete in low Earth orbit, or at least on a smaller platform, because I'll show you all this. On a smaller platform, like you can see right here, it actually carried the Apollo command module and I believe the lander below it, but it was on a smaller rocket than the Saturn V because this one was not planned to make it to the moon. It was just planned to be conducting orbital tests of the command and lunar modules before they were sent off to the moon. So it's a fairly interesting rocket, a very integral part, actually, of the Apollo project at large. And it's really crazy to see this thing, because I believe this was the pedestal that they built for this thing, built on the Saturn V launch pad, and you just see the size disparity in between them. This thing is a midget compared to the final Saturn V. And let me go see if I can show you all the final Saturn V. Everyone knows the Saturn V. It's an icon of U.S. space exploration, but we have to show it. There is the final Saturn V to kind of give you all the difference in scale.
Yeah, that Saturn V is like massive.
Dude, the Saturn V was a beast, like an absolute monster. And what is crazy, the thing is that this entire monster was needed to lift just a tiny little command module, which is that area, the little silvery area up there, and also the lander module, which was under it, inside of the 4th stage, I believe, to the moon. And that's everything that was needed to be able to get to the moon at the time. Now we are
we hadn't gone back to the moon since then. That's kind of interesting.
Lack of funding and lack of interest. You know, it was just... well, I mean, that's what they're saying, at least, you know. This is not the Starship. Let me see if I can pull up the SpaceX. There it is, the SpaceX Starship. This is what we're building now, to return to the moon and also go to Mars, all in one package. This thing is actually far larger than the Saturn V was. Let me see if I can get y'all a, let's see, a SpaceX Starship scale comparison. And let's see here. Here we go. This will actually give you all a bit of an idea of the difference in scale of the Saturn V and the Starship. So this is the Starship all the way over here. It's bigger than the SLS. It's bigger than the Saturn V. It's bigger than anything that's ever been produced, interestingly enough, that's ever flown to space by anyone on the planet. It's a very interesting kind of a system, and also it can carry more payload, hypothetically, than the Saturn V or any other kind of system ever could have, inside of the actual Starship itself, which is the black part at the top. That is and also what's really interesting about the Starship is because the stages are all reusable. The lower stage is just one giant stage. There is no multiple stages like the Saturn V had, where I believe it had 4 stages. The Starship is a 2-stage system. The first stage gets the Starship into orbit. The second stage, which is the Starship, makes its way onto the moon or Mars. And some people are also probably thinking, well, what the hell? Like, why in the world do you not need a bigger rocket to get to Mars? I mean, that's way farther away. Really, the only thing that's the concern, at least with something like the Starship, or the Saturn V for that matter, is being able to get enough velocity to escape the Earth's gravity. That's really the only issue. So once you escape Earth's gravity, really the only thing that matters at that point is the trajectory, because once you escape the gravity, the momentum is largely a constant rate at that point. There's a slight decay because of the sun's gravity, but that's really minuscule. And once you're able to escape the Earth's gravity, you're able to make it to the Mars or the moon, depending on your trajectory and the orbits of those planets and such things like that. So you don't really need that much more fuel, but this thing is also maximized to be able to carry a significant payload as well. So very interesting stuff with the Starship. Really puts the Saturn V to shame, at least by what its final number should be for payload capacity and also its abilities. But still, the Saturn V walked, so that way the Starship can eventually run, hopefully. And then, of course, NASA's still working on the SLS, but that's pretty much a hopeless cause at this point because of the lack of funding that NASA has. I don't think they'll ever really be able to complete the SLS project on time and on target. And also,
has the Starship ever even actually like been successful yet? Because you know the one just like exploded yesterday, I believe. So have they ever like actually worked completely?
There has been successful iterations of the Starship landing. I believe there's been some suborbital skimming kind of tests that have been done with the Starship. But I believe there has been a successful one where the booster and the Starship itself actually made it into a the booster launched the Starship into orbit and then returned back to the pad. And then I think the Starship re-entered somewhere and then splashed down. I forgot where it was, but it did do that successfully. So there has been a successful flight. Gunfox is saying Flight 6, where that actually was conducted. So there has been a successful Starship flight so far. It's just that Flight 7 was the one that spontaneously combusted and blew up. And I don't think anyone really knows exactly why yet, or that hasn't been mentioned publicly as to why that one was a failure.
And how much does each Starship cost? Because I think they recovered the actual booster part of it, right? The like metal, like aluminum looking part down there at the bottom. They recovered that. I think it made it back, but the top part didn't. So how much is it?
So let's see. So Starships cost, let's see.
Damn, 100 million per launch. Dang.
That's not that bad. Let's see the cost to launch a Saturn V. Cost to launch Saturn V. Let's see. The cost of launching a Saturn V Apollo mission was in between 185 million to 189 million. And let's see if we can get any other additional information. So wait, hang on. The cost per launch in modern day numbers was 1.4 billion for each Saturn V.
Oh,
so you had to fling
dang.
1.4 billion into the fire pretty much to launch the Saturn V. The SpaceX Starship is able to do it with a far greater payload capacity at only 100 million. So when we put it into space figures, 100 million is actually peanuts compared to what it used to cost to launch a small payload into orbit, or much less towards the moon. So massive decrease in cost.
What's the profit idea behind this? Because it's a heavy lift a spaceship, obviously, or a shuttle, actually, or whatever you want to call it. A rocket, that's the proper term. It's a heavy lift one. So what's going up on it? Like massive satellites or what?
We don't really know yet at this point. There has been some ideas floated around that industrial mining operations could be started on the moon and Mars to make these profitable in some way. And of course, for them to be able to go to Mars, they actually have to fling bunches of automated starships at Mars before the first people can ever arrive, because there has to be a mining operation on Mars to be able to create the fuel that would be required to send a starship back from Mars, because Mars is a one-way trip. So largely the moon is as well for the Starship. So once it breaks out of Earth's gravity and then it lands on those planets, it's largely expended all of its available fuel. And especially for Mars, it has expended so much fuel that it would not be able to exit the surface of Mars and then reach an escape velocity to make it back to Earth. So they would have to send a whole bunch of starships that pretty much would be condemned to remaining on the planet of Mars till the end of their days, so that way they could set up an automated mining colony to be able to produce usable fuel, so that way they could fuel starships for the return voyage back home. So there is an idea that there could be industrial mining operations conducted on the moon and Mars in the future to make the return trips profitable, or to at least create some sort of a actual business that would make space travel viable in these kinds of numbers, or more so for that matter with the kind of payload that the starships can carry. And so that's what we're largely thinking right now would be the reason. There's also the additional reason that they're wanting to send manned flights to the moon and Mars as well, and create some form of lunar and Martian colonies that could be used in the future for research purposes that could possibly benefit us back here on Earth. Like, for example, trying to figure out new genetic strains of crops that may be more resilient, that would be growing in a space-like environment.
Interesting. So that's an interesting business model there. So they're not really planning on making money in the short term, I guess. It's more of a long-term play. So kind of interesting.
It's kind of like the first railroads, because the first steam railroads, at least passenger ones, really didn't make a lot of money, and they really weren't even that efficient. It was really more so just trying to prove the concept, and people just kept throwing money at it until eventually they worked, and they worked incredibly well. And then railroads became the primary form of transport. And then later on, the car was very similar. It took a lot of upfront investment in failures and a whole bunch of vehicles that just simply did not work to finally come up with successful iterations, and then not only that, commercially mass producible iterations like the Model T that then would finally see the car launched into the preeminence that it has today in modern transport, at least inside the United States. So this is sort of the same thing for space travel.
Very interesting. I like to see that. Also, I see that Blue Origin had a successful rocket launch, I think, the other day as well. I think it was the successful version of it. It's a very, how do you say it? The rocket is kind of shaped kind of
a very
a little
phallic
bit,
kind of an operation.
yeah.
It's
It's shaped like a wee-wee.
let's see if we... Yeah. It's not exactly
What's no, that's in the wee wee one. There's another one that looks even worse.
No. That is the wee wee one. It's just that it doesn't have the capsule on top of it anymore that made it look. There's the capsule that made it look like a wee wee. Like,
There's the top.
this thing is so goofy and stupid. I cannot stand to hardly look at it. And let me see if I can find y'all the actual rocket. Let's see here. Dang, they don't have a bed. Dude, they removed the picture of the rocket from Wikipedia because they're so ashamed of it. Blue Origin. Here we go. Let me go see if I can show y'all the wee wee. There we go. There it is.
There it is. Look at that.
Oh my
I
lord.
don't know who designed that, but that doesn't look right.
Man, that thing is terrible. Also, it looks like they're designing a rocket called the New Glenn NG-1, which will look like this. Don't know what the purpose of this one is. It almost looks like an Estes rocket. So I don't know what this thing will be accomplishing. But we know that this one accomplished putting William Shatner kind of in space for a little bit. So that was kind of neat, I guess. But every time I look at this rocket, I always think of that laugh, Matthew. Oh! I always think of that laugh every time, without fail.
I need to go to space and look around. Oh, good luck peeing in that bottle. Oh,
I guess you could say that some people call my little rocket operation a dick move. Oh! but anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well, at least the whole space side of things. And I hope that it really got exactly what you were looking for. Hopefully, Gunfox 61, working off of the limited amount of rocketry knowledge that I have. It's not much, but hopefully it sounded like a good deal. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Danny B, who puts in a $30 donation. And thank you very much, Danny, for that support. And also, someone said in the live chat, before I get to your super chat, Danny, someone said, as a Southern man, I've never heard a more manly wee-wee in my life. I'm trying to keep it as PG as possible, to be honest. I was going to say the actual term. I'm like, that might sound a little too crude. So let me call it something else, but that was my best attempt. But anyways, back to Danny's super chat. He said, good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here, and I'm so sorry. It's been a hell of a week and not a good day either. I'm sorry to hear that, Danny. It happens sometimes. And he said, but anyways, so do what you do. Your France is going to do an LSA.
And thank you so much for the support, Danny B. And I hate to hear that you're not having the greatest of week. I got to be honest with you. We don't have the greatest weeks all the time. Sometimes when we get on air and some people are like, oh, Enforcer isn't really being classic Enforcer. That's generally because the week isn't doing that great in the background. We just don't really say a lot about our personal lives because we don't want, to make this like a YouTube drama channel or anything like that. We want it to be all about the news and what the primary purpose of this channel is, which is supporting Western and American interests. So we don't really want to bring our personal lives in. But beyond that, with that being said, I completely understand because sometimes we have weeks that at least the few people we tell about our personal lives in detail, they're always shocked at sometimes the stuff we were dealing with in the background. So I completely understand where you're coming from with that, and I hope that this next week here will be better, or hopefully you have the weekend to be able to relax on, although head chefs usually don't get a lot of time off. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope things look up for you, and I can always tell you that things always eventually turn around and look up. Times might be rough now, but times will be better later. And some people will say, no, they never get better. I don't know why, because in my experience, and doing this for 3 years, there's been plenty of ups and downs behind the scenes, and things always turn around and get better, and then they'll get worse, and then they'll get better. And so it's always a game of a back and forth for the large part. But I hope that things do get better for you here in the next week. And whatever you're dealing with, I hope you know the Lee Spring Army has your back and is backing you up all the way, Danny B, the head chef of the LSA. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Adam McLean. And also, Danny B said, nope, I have Monday off. Now,
hey,
that's
lucky you.
Having Monday off. You're just like us. You have Monday off.
Yeah.
I enjoy your Monday. But also, by the way, moving on to our next super chat. This one goes to Adam McLean, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Adam, for that support as always. He said, don't bother with 2 turntables and a microphone. This channel is where it's at.
And thank you so much for the support, Adam McLean. And thank you for the kind words. 2 turntables. Turntables is a railroad thing, you know what I mean? We actually have those railroads. But
oh, how the tables do turn.
Man, those tables do be turning. We actually have one here near to us in Leeds. There it is. That's the Norfolk Southern Norris Yard turntable. I've never seen it in real life, but I've seen it here. And I was actually shocked that they had one. And crazily enough, they actually still use it. Apparently, they actually do turn locomotives around from time to time, although it's not much, because that decreases the amount of available locomotives, and there's a whole thing with that and timeliness and making sure to fulfill contracts, and it's downtime and that costs money. Don't do that. Railroads are very stingy with the amount of downtime that they will give a locomotive or a crew or anything like that. It is all about being on time in the railroads. Kind of like Amazon. Amazon takes it to an ungodly extreme, though. They make the railroads look tame. But I believe there's another one as well somewhere here in the city. I don't know if CSX has one because this is their yard in Birmingham. Some of y'all are like, well, do you go to these rail yards? No, I've never actually really been to them. I just see them on Google Maps and stare at them a lot. Actually, they have an old roundhouse here, but it looks like the turntable was dug up because you can actually see where it was, and it's just not there anymore. Do they have a street view? No, they don't. Wait a minute, can we see?
Also, fun fact: do you know why the railroads usually drive the workers and also the whole situation so hard? Do you know why that really is in reality?
Is there railroading them?
No, that's not a joke. I was actually being serious.
Oh.
That's because the main investors in most of the railroad companies are actually big capital. Big companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, big ones like that. So I think that might play a role in it because, of course, when the big investment groups come in, it comes down to bottom line, and that's pretty much it at that point. So they want to push things as hard as they can, and it's typically the way it goes. So I think that might be part of it.
Oh, look, there's actually a BNSF turntable in the town, too. I'll actually tell you why there's a massive push for all that. It goes all the way back, I'm not turning to Putin. It goes all the way back to the very end of the 1890s when a person modeled the New York Central System named J.P. Morgan. And J.P. Morgan was a man that was looking to try and greatly create an efficiency inside of the New York Central System's railroads. And getting out of that voice and really quickly explaining what actually happened there, railroads at the time were wildly inefficient. And it's crazy when you explain the inefficiencies because a lot of people would think, well, that's what railroads do. But actually, it's wildly inefficient. When a railroad takes on custom orders, because back in the day, most industries actually had a direct railroad connection, there was a lot of shunning that had to be done in rail yards at the time to be able to get all of these little local orders set up and then go drop off these cars or spot those cars as they call them and drop them off at the industries, either filled up with stuff or empty cars for those industries to load up. That's wildly inefficient for the railroads and eats up an entire locomotive, an entire crew, a load of fuel to move around all day long and hardly do anything for not a lot of money. So JP Morgan said that's woefully inefficient and we need to start canceling smaller contracts. If we're doing contracts like that, it ought to be massive amounts of cargo that are being moved. And also, we need to make sure that the system is as efficient as possible. We can't have downtime. We just can't have locomotives idling and burning fuel, doing nothing. They have to be doing something. And so that's largely what created the modern American railroad system that all of y'all see today. The modern American railroad system actually gave up a good amount of their business to the trucking industry. The trucking industry didn't rise really out of it beating the railroad. In some instances it would, but those were usually on perishable products and more nitty-gritty kind of things, little detailed deliveries inside of cities. But the railroads largely gave up a lot of business to the trucking companies because for the railroads, it just didn't make any economic sense to keep doing them. And that's why railroads nowadays really focus on these giant operations where they're moving hundreds of rail cars from one place to the other because that's what makes them money and that's the most efficient way to do things. So that's why you don't really see turntables being used that much. That's why they don't really exist in some places. That's why some of them are torn up, and when you see them, they're fairly rare and they're seldom used. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because I hope that was an interesting little rabbit hole there. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, it's officially 24 hours until TikTok shuts down in the United States. They actually follow through what they're saying. So TikTok, it's running out of time. But anyways, jumping into our next post, or not our next post, our next super chat here. This one goes to Jacob Hawley, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you, Jacob, for that $20 support. And thank you very much for supporting the channel. And also, I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing at myself. But Jacob said, I don't like Putin, but he has fostered such an intense nationalism that there are people more rabid than him now, and I think trying to remove him would trigger the nukes and a lion in a corner, more like a rat in a corner. He said, I'm worried about who comes after him.
Despite all my rage, I'm still just a rat in some jeans, or whatever that song was. But beyond that, I gotta say, thank you for the support. And I would say that Putin might actually, he might actually be easy to get out, because no matter how nationalistic people can get, if the economic situation's bad and people are starving, it doesn't care if they're nationalists or not. They want to eat. So that still, I think, would end up reigning supreme at the end of the day in Russian decision making, because it usually has historically, even when nationalism was high. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And I think it wants to give her support, but still an interesting point and one to be considered for sure. And with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
Also, I don't know if anybody saw it, speaking of TikTok, by the way, but the TikTok CEO came out and made this like really scripted, like really stupid speech today. He said, "We are trying to foster an environment of free speech, and we're fighting for your constitutional right for free speech on TikTok. And we've done a good job of that. TikTok is a community, a thriving community. It's a great place, and we're fighting for your First Amendment rights." And this is coming from the company which is connected to another company which has connections with the CCP. It's like, I don't need like a company that's attached to something like that to fight for my First Amendment right. In fact, that they would be most against your First Amendment right. It's like, you're not fooling anybody, buddy. I'm not buying that one. It's just a bunch of bull. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here. This one goes to WCatFN, who puts in a 20, and thank you very much, WCatFN, for that support. They said cable cutter finding planes should have a harm-equipped escort, and any lock-on justifies a retaliatory strike. And keep up the good work, guys.
And thank you so much for the support. And I would agree, from here on it should. I understand why they didn't do that yet, though. Keeping a jet in the air, especially a Rafale, is incredibly expensive. It costs around, I think, $25,000 an hour. So they don't. So the French government was probably thinking, well, you know, what are the chances of a Russian air defense system locking onto that plane and shooting it down? Chances are low. And then they locked onto it, and now the chances are increasing. So from this point forward, it would make sense to do that regardless of the cost. But beforehand, they were like, we don't really want to send up a Rafale, you know, burning 25 grand an hour for something that probably would not happen. And now it actually did. But still, I thank you so much once again for support, and I hope that does address that well. And I certainly agree with you. From this point forward, they should be accompanied by a Rafale that is carrying AGM-88 HARMs or other forms of anti-radiation missiles. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one here goes to S Storm, who puts in a $20 donation. Thank you very much, S Storm, for that support. They said, "What is a skid steer?" And thanks for the work that you guys do. And thank you very much for the kind words. A skid steer, also known by the brand name Bobcat sometimes, there's multiple different manufacturers of skid steers, it's like a little compact little front loader. There's one right there. That's a Bobcat. That's the one I always refer to. It's the most recognizable one, I would say. It looks like that. There's, of course, a track version, and there's a wheeled version. The wheeled version is much more fun because you can flip that one back and forth a little bit. The tracks, you can't really do that. But a pretty cool little thing right here. I got to drive one once when I was like 10 years old, and it was quite fun. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, that thing's a skid steer right here. I tell you what, my boy. But still, thank you for the support. I hope that does answer your question, by the way. And thank you so much for enjoying the channel and helping it to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you who supported this channel, and you don't even have to, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Frostbright Productions, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Frostbright, for that support. He said, "I know you guys had to mute me. And also, by the way, we did not mute you. So if something happened, that was not us."
I think that might be
Nightbot. Maybe so. I didn't even see Nightbot do anything, really. But he said, "Just know that no matter what, I will always support you and Matt and the entirety of the LSA community. And thank you guys for everything you do."
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. I don't remember seeing you get muted, and I know that we had a disagreement about Red Note, but that was nothing that we would mute over. That was just a disagreement. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to thank you, Frostbright, for always having been around and supported this channel and being a part of the LSA. Because regardless whether we agree or disagree on Red Note, I know one thing's for certain: you and me agree on supporting American and Western interests. And I got to thank you so much for being here with us and supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you who have been with us a incredibly long time, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And so huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Vohall214, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you, Vohall, for that support. They said, "Thanks for all the hard work," and take one from that chat.
And thank you so much for enjoying the hard work. We love to be here on air and continue to cover this news every single night. And we will make sure to take a live chat in your honor. And y'all wouldn't believe it, but the entire Republic of Italy has appeared again in the chat. And they just said, hello.
Oh,
whoa. That actually puts so much pressure on me, knowing that the entire nation of Italy is watching right now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I mean, I think this is Little Italy, though. This isn't the big one.
Little Italy? Well, isn't that a place in New York City? Little Italy? And where is Little Italy? Where is it? There's the East Village. There's Chinatown. There's two bridges. What does Chinatown look like? Man, it looks like the rest of New York over here.
It looks like China.
It looks like... Let's see. What does these signs... I don't know what the hell these signs say. I don't know that much Mandarin or Chinese or whatever the hell you want to call it. But, look at this. They were building... Oh, that's the Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation right there.
Did they buy that too?
Looks like they bought that as well. Matthew, I'm telling you what. We got to stop that Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation. I'll tell you. Oh, look, that actually does look Chinese. The Golden Bowl.
Yes, it kind of does. The Golden Bowl. That looks kind of good. It's Wonton Food Incorporated.
Man, look at that. Crazy, man. It's, let's see. What else is there of this place? Oh, wow, look at that. That's a nice fire station right there.
Yeah, I like that. Kind of like sort of sticks out, but it looks interesting.
Honestly, I would say that I wish more of the city looked like that. That actually is incredibly nice looking.
A little bit of, character would probably help.
Yeah, a little bit of character instead of, glass building, 9 million times. I like this building as well. I believe that is it's not the Woolworth building. I forgot the name of it, y'all. I'm so sorry. Like, I would be thinking about the name if I knew that we were going to be looking at New York City for some reason, but sadly, I didn't. This is impromptu, so I don't know the name of that building, unfortunately. I would on another day. I think it's like the 55th Street building or something. I don't know. But anyways, with that, it is... Wait, you know what? We can find that freaking building. I'm going to find it, and we're going to get the name, because I'm not going to walk off defeated like that. Wait a minute. The David N. Dinkins Manhattan Municipal Building. I've never heard it called that before. I would remember a name like Dinkins, because I make a load of jokes about it. I don't remember ever hearing that this building was called the Dinkins Building. Man, that's what is the inside? They don't even show the inside of it. They don't even take pictures of it. I guess it's condemned or something. I don't know. But that archway is nice at the bottom floor. They used to build buildings with class. Y'all know what I mean? Like, they used to build them to where everything was impressive. It was like, wow, look at that arch. Nowadays you just see, like, a square. Like, for example, let's just find a modern building. Hang on. I gotta go find that stupid one, Matthew, that's incredibly thin. That's near Central Park, that everyone looks at and
The
goes...
Flatiron Building.
No. I'm talking about that one that's like a square, but it just goes straight up. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, like, wide or anything like that. It's incredibly narrow.
Maybe. I'm just too busy. I was being distracted here. I'm seeing someone in the live chat telling me that their girlfriend switched to red chat and turning into a communist. No joke. I was trying to figure out what. I was like, really? We have an anecdote here of someone turning communist from red chat? That's crazy.
From red chat? You mean red note?
Well, they're calling it red chat, but yeah, I think it's called red note.
Man, commies, man. I'm telling you. Also, man, look at this. There's just abandoned lots right here. Look at this. $50 gazillion. Like, it's probably, like, for that lot. What was here before? Because you can see that there was a building here at some point.
Yeah, I don't even know, man. It looks like they've, had built that building out of cardboard or something.
Yeah, and what the hell is this building? Look at that. It curves inwards. I don't like that.
Turn to the right. Keep turning. Figs.
Would you like some figs?
Oh, it's a medical company. That's interesting. I thought it was like food.
Proudly outfitting the USA medical team. Is that the Olympics U.S. medical team that they're talking about right here? They have an Olympic medical team? I think they do.
I don't know.
I don't know. But let's see. Those bushes are bushing. Like, they're fake. Like, those things are made out of, like, plastic or something. There's no way they're...
And whoever's keeping those landscapes like a bushmaster.
Dude, literally, like, the Marco Pierre White comes in, he's like, I'm gonna make microwaved bushes in no stock pot. And it's like, it just turns out like that. It's pretty impressive stuff. This street's actually really nice, by the way. This is actually shocking, because usually we drop down in lower Manhattan, down here somewhere, and you'll be like, ugh, like, let's just drop down here. Oh, well, I actually just going to have to eat my foot on that. This is actually a really nice street right here. Why in the world do we never...
doing in the middle?
New Yorkers, man.
Looks like they're about to hit the Google truck.
look, man, they don't give a fig, all right? Like,
Oh.
wow. But where the hell would we usually drop down? Because I'll be honest, here we go. New York City sometimes, like this street, usually whenever I drop down in street views, looks a little slummy. But crazily enough, out of the 3 streets we've looked at so far, 2 out of 3 of them were incredibly nice. So I guess it really is just a street-to-street thing in New York City, kind of like ancient Rome, which was also very similar. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, Matthew, when you don't want to go to Soho, you say no-ho.
No. Where do you live? No.
Ukrainian village. Here's why
Village.
Ukrainian village is the best in the world. Let's take a look at it. Oh.
There's nothing Ukrainian about this place.
No, there's nothing Ukrainian about this place at all. The hell are you talking about? Man, if it was Ukrainian, there'd be some guy on the side of the street with a boombox going, "Here is why Ukrainian village is the best in the world." And I'm not seeing one of them. Also, who is that? Is that Lavrov? Man, he's about to go something like that. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that we rabbit holed well and you got a good laugh out of it at least. But with that, why in the world is this showing up?
All his old ale house. You want a pint?
Oh,
That
that's
that
actually
looks like a real
cool.
pub.
Yeah, that's actually cool. It looks like a legitimate real pub. That's actually neat. I was expecting like a tourist trap or something like that. This is actually a legit. That is. Aw, man.
that hot dog looks sus.
Aw, man. I might be interested in partaking in this hot dog treat. Aw, man.
Oh man, call in Hot Dog Man, aka Glizzy Gobbler, aka I love glizzies.
Aw, man. Dude, they legitimately serve real British food here. Tasteless. Like, that's like, it's just onions, cheese, and crackers. Honestly, a great combination, by the way. Don't diss it until you try it. It's actually pretty good. But, man, this is a legitimate, like, British or Irish pub. And also, look at the doors. Like, the doors have been, like, kicked on
Looks
so
like it's
much.
off a ship or something. Like it's like a saloon door.
I did that well that time. You can't even deny that. That was actually a pretty good one. But
That was good.
anyways. Hold up, man. Now I'm getting interested in New York City. What's the Comedy Cellar? Man,
The Comedy Cellar. That looks like sketchy.
it's like the New York version of the Laugh Factory. Let's take a look.
Oh.
Wait a minute.
Is that Seth Rogen?
I think it might
Oh my
be.
God,
I
it
think,
looks like Seth Rogen.
wait, hang on. I think that legitimately is Seth Rogen. Hang on. Wait, no. It's not Seth Rogen. It's that other guy. It's that other
Who's
guy.
the other guy?
I don't know. Oh man, I don't know. But he hangs out around Seth Rogen. I know that. Who is this guy? Wait a minute, hang on. The chat will catch up here in a second. We'll have answers. We'll have answers to this. We're gonna come back to that though. Let's take a look. So, I don't know who that is. Also, the amount of lights in here is insane. Someone said Doug Ford. Let's take a look. No, that ain't Doug Ford, all right?
Oh my God.
This guy, man, in that picture, he looks like he's about to say, "Oh, so you got a good old cheese there." You know, it's like, I mean, it's like
that dude's like, you know how they do those memes like wide Zelensky and stuff like that? This dude's like naturally like in the meme phase.
oh, wait a minute, it's Jeff Ross. Yeah, that's him. Now that I hear the name, it is that guy. Here we go. There he is.
Oh, that guy. Oh, that guy right there. I'm not going to say anything because I think people might like him, but he's kind of obnoxious.
Man, you know some guy who really is obnoxious? Brett Kirshner. This guy.
Oh, that guy. I always thought that guy was Notch that created Minecraft. He looks the same.
You know, he does. He really does when you think about it. But this guy, you know, he did the machine skit and then he just never lived that down. He's living on that high since then. And also he's got some severe alcoholism problems, man. Like it's bad. Like it's really bad to the point that he's like killing his liver just about daily. But then he revels in that and he's like, man, I wake up in the morning, I have a mimosa right when I wake up. I'm like, that's not healthy, by the way, man. It's like, you know, that's not something to be proud of there. You know, you're killing your liver. Your liver is screaming in pain. But anyways, with that, it is time to move on from New York City because we have so many more questions to cover. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here is going to go to, let's see, it is Poco Loco. Thank you very much, Poco Loco, for that $27 support and helping to keep us running, of course. And I do not see a comment attached to it, but thank you very much from the state of Poco Loco. We appreciate it very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much, Poco Loco, similar to Trendearagua, but I'm just kidding. Thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And and if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. You know, Matthew, every time I hear that Trendearagua thing, you know what I think of? You know, like, this is what I think of. Like, that particular person, okay, imagine them in a business meeting with a Mexican business that's trying to get into the water, you know, business, like Dasani. So he goes down there, he's like, you know, my water, it's a great water, it's trending agua, you know, it's like, it's like, it comes off like that to me. I think of that every time I think of that guy saying, trending agua. I think of that every single time as him saying,
Well,
trending agua.
you see the type of agua that the Trendearagua is putting out, it happens to be a little bit red in color, but it's not water.
The blood flows like water, like, or something like that. But anyways, moving on from that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to none other than Danny B. It's Danny once again. He puts in another $20 donation, and thank you very much, Danny, for the second support of the night. He said, thanks, Enforcers. Y'all made my day better, and it's snowing like crazy here, and it's only supposed to be 11 degrees tomorrow. That is cold. He said, and I work for a few Italian chefs that hired me to run these restaurants, and I'll tell you, nope. It sounds like they run a very, very hardcore operation out here, actually. A very tough one. And you said run their restaurants. So you're running a few restaurants. That's a whole nother animal right there. That's running a lot. That's a lot of responsibility right there. I don't think I'd want that much responsibility. But also, that's going to be cold as hell. And I believe it's Colorado. Danny's from Colorado, correct?
Yeah. He's in I believe Denver, if I remember correctly. It's down near Aurora, kind of around. Well,
Yeah,
actually, south. It's more south than that. Yeah, but he's around there.
So it's about to be real chilly there tomorrow, very chilly. But I'm glad we were able to make your day better, Danny. And I hope it gets better, of course, because there are some good times and bad times. And you just got to flow through them and treat them all the same. And sort of like have a nice, steady, sort of stoic mentality about it. But if you're handling that much responsibility, you already know about all that. I don't have to tell you. But Enforcer, what say you?
Oh yeah, stress sounds like it's a part of your routine at that point. And also, I would have turned that down, because one thing I know, I'm not even into cooking that much, and I'm not really that good of a cook, to be entirely honest. When I have tried to cook, Matthew actually does most of the cooking. He's very good at it, by the way, incredibly good at it. But
I'm a chef. They call me Chef Matt.
They call him Chef Boyardee, the way this boy out here RDing. But anyways, moving on.
Calling me a chef is like calling. Let's see here. What's somebody that's acting like they know something and they don't? Name an example.
Well, there's many, but it's kind of like mentioning that Shakespeare play, Matthew, that Macbeth play. You know, it doesn't go over well.
It's kind of like calling a CNN reporter a reporter. They're not really a reporter, but I'm a chef too. But not really. I'm not really a chef. I'm just a little cook. That's all.
Andy just cooks, but he's great at cooking. I mean, he's wonderful at cooking. Really, truly, the best. But still, I got to thank you so much for the support. I'm glad to hear that we did make your day better. And it sounds like it's cold as hell out there in Colorado. And what's interesting is that I actually have friends out there in Colorado right now, and they didn't tell me nothing about how cold it was out there. But still, I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, I would have never worked for Italians in the restaurant business, because one thing I know, I don't even know a lot about cooking. That's why I got onto the whole thing about Matthew cooking, is that Italians are very particular about cooking and how to cook and what you do. And I've always heard that. I've seen that, actually, looking around at people who do cook. Like that one guy, Matthew, who said, if my mother had the wheels, she would have been the bike. Like that guy, like, every single Italian I've ever seen that gets out into the cooking world in public is always very particular. They're like, that is not how you cook the pasta. And it's like, look, man, it's America. Like, it's a different place, different people. Okay.
Listen, if I was working in the restaurant, I'd be busting that pasta sticks all over the place. Just for the hell of it. I'd be banging that spaghetti all over everything with it falling everywhere. I'd be like, oh my God, there's spaghetti. I'd be like, there it goes, bing, bing.
Man, and then they tell you can't break the damn spaghetti noodles and everything. It's like, look, man.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's like, it's a free country around here. We got to do it. We got to do it. Like what the hell's the problem with it? Like, that's my real question. Like, what the hell's the problem with breaking the spaghetti noodles? I mean, they're freaking thin noodles. It's like they're gonna retain the sauce the same way. You're just making them shorter and easier to handle. I don't want to be like a damn heathen having to spin my fork in the spaghetti and then pull up these mile-long things to take a giant bite off of. And then the sauce gets all over your chin. It's like I don't want any of that. And then they're like, you can't cut it with a knife once it's cooked. It's like, what the hell is up with this? Like, it's like I understand it's an Italian dish. But it's like, I don't see the Chinese coming over here to this country, Matthew, and cooking up traditional Chinese dishes, and then be like, what the hell do you mean you're not going to eat it our way? It's like, I don't see them doing that. They Americanize their dishes. And then it's like the Italians come over here with this gall that they have, and then tell us how we can even cook it. It's like, I don't even get it.
One type of chef that does piss me off, though, I will say this. I don't think Danny's this type of chef, so hopefully, well, there's no hopefully. I don't think I'm going to offend him with this one, because this is a little bit out there for, I think, a lot of chefs. Those chefs that cook up the weird stuff, like the bull penis and stuff like that, the weird, like, dishes like that, and then serve it. I saw Marco Pierre White eating that the other day on a YouTube video.
Ew.
And also, like, ant pie or something like that. It was, like, made of ant eggs or something like that. It's like, what the hell? It's like, why don't you just cook up something a little bit more, less weird than that? It's like, I don't know about eating those dishes.
I wouldn't eat those. I generally would avoid them. But one thing I do think is cool, I think the dishes that are really neat, like the ones that are creative, was like beef Wellington, where it's like a steak pastry. It's like, that sounds really interesting and neat, and it's like, that's a cool dish, and apparently it takes a lot of skill to make. It's like, that's really neat. And there's a lot of, dishes out there that I haven't eaten them, like, those are really neat and cool sounding, but, the ones where it's like, you're just doing stuff to see if God will strike you down for your hubris, it's like, I don't really get those, because it's like, they don't even sound like they taste good. It's like doing it to do it. It's and I'm just not really one to do that. It's like, the food's got to be good at the end of the day. In an ant pie, it doesn't really sound like it's going to be that great. It sounds like it'd be, it's gross, honestly. But still, thank you so much. Also, Danny B said, definitely not. I'll never do that. Good, Danny B. You're one of the real ones.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Oh my goodness. I don't understand the people that eat that stuff. Like, I saw that Marco guy eating it. He said, oh, that's very good. I can't repeat what the guy said on here. It's too crude to say that on the air, but they were eating it and they were like, oh, that's tasty. It's like, what are you, crazy? It's like, I don't care if that's tasty or not. That's just, you're never living that down.
Also, by the way, French food looks good. For everyone to always talk about how they eat snails and frogs, the food looks great. Like, actually, that doesn't look that bad.
That's charcuterie, isn't it?
I don't think so. I think this is something different. Let's see. It's sauerkraut with sausages, salt pork, and potatoes. So that giant lump is sauerkraut in there.
Man, I thought it said charcuterie down there.
Man, what are these? Wait a minute. This is brought down by a region here, because this is in the Ardennes. Interesting. This is from Lorraine, but Alsace and Lorraine are like the same province, so I don't know why they're dividing them like that. But so these are mostly going to be German styled, because Alsace-Lorraine was either German. Well, it was really German through most of its history, and then later on it ended up becoming French. But yeah, that's interesting. These are mostly like German-French dishes here. That's interesting. Well, so what do they have from France? What is this?
What the hell?
This is
that
fish
pickles?
stew. No, this is fish.
Oh, damn.
It's eels. It's practically jellied eels. Like, they have that in Britain, but this is without the congealed stuff around the eels. I don't know about that one. Let's see. This is a traditional cuisine of Normandy. Let's see. It consisted of all 4 chambers of a beef cattle's stomach, parts of the large intestine. This was outlawed in France.
Oh.
So this is like the French form of haggis. For people to shit on haggis, the French literally made a soup out of it. It's like, it's like, honestly, man, some of this food, there's foie gras, which is famous. I don't really know what that tastes like or really anything about it. I just know the name, and I don't even think
They
I'm
messed
pronouncing
those ducks up. They messed those ducks up to make that. Like, they force feed the ducks. It's not right.
Hell, dude, you haven't even gotten to the one with the bird, like the other bird. I forgot what the name of it is. I gotta find that, because they literally drown the bird in a vat of wine, and it over gorgeous before they do it. It's a whole thing. Like, it's honestly gross, and then you just eat the bird whole, pretty much, picking the bones out as you go. It's honestly an offense. But I'm not gonna lie, for everyone to say the French have good food, most of the foods we're looking at here, they don't look that good. Like, they kind of just look mid. I've never really looked at French food, but all of this, There's the snails with parsley butter.
Oh, man, this food's nasty as hell. Like, this is French.
This is French food.
Yeah,
Let's
this is
go
nasty as hell.
British food, British dishes. We need to find. I'll be honest with you. The alternative. Let's see here. Hang on. Dang it. Do they not have a list of British dishes? Are they going to act like Britain doesn't have food? Come on. Let me see here. List of English dishes. I have a feeling that the British are going to look much more palatable now after looking at an actual French dish list. So they have the miniature clanger, which is just a meat pastry. I like how it's
I
called.
like those. I like those beef pasties that they have over there, and the little like stands they have in England. Those are like the best things ever.
Let's see. They have bangers and mash, which is just sausage and mashed potatoes. I like the names of British food. They have beans on toast. It's beans on toast.
That's kind of original there.
Yeah. It's like, what is this? Also, by the way, chicken tikka masala is not an Indian dish. It's actually British. It was created in Britain. So that's actually interesting. It's actually not bad, too. I've had it a couple of times. Cobbler, which if you've been in the South, cobbler is considered largely a dish of the South, but it actually is originally from Britain. Really good dish. Love cobblers to pieces. Beef Wellington, which is great. Let's see. Black pudding, which is not that great.
Oh.
I didn't like it.
Nasty as hell.
Bubble and squeak, which is kind of just like a normal breakfast. It's just eggs, sausage, some ham, and eggs. So, it is what it is. And then you also have cauliflower cheese, which cauliflower with cheese is very good. Very good. Like it. Cumberland sausage, which is a thing that's made here in Alabama, actually, down in, where is it, Matthew? Evergreen or Greenville or something. It's very good.
Greenville.
Yeah, it's a very good.
Evergreen. Evergreen, actually, I think.
Deviled eggs.
Whoa, what is that? Do you see that one? Look at that dish. Look at that dish right there in the middle. Do you see that?
Why? What on earth?
What is that?
It is meatballs made from minced off cuts and offal, especially pork, traditionally pig's heart, liver, and fatty belly meat or bacon, together with herbs for flavoring, and sometimes added breadcrumbs. Don't know why they have to call it that, though. That's just really mean. But also, fish and chips. Legendary. Like, everyone knows that one. The full English breakfast, get rid of the black pudding, is honestly pretty good. Game pie. That's the pie after you win Squid Game. You get to eat this one. Let's see. Grody pudding. Don't know what the hell that is. That actually doesn't sound good. Hot cross bun. Oh, Matthew, that's where that song comes from. Hot cross buns? The one you learn in, like, music class?
Oh, yeah. I think so. Also, by the way, we gotta, like, speed up, man, because we're getting behind.
Kippers.
That's a dog, too.
Kipper the dog. But anyways, with that, we do have to speed up. But with that, thank you once again for support, Danny B. I hope you enjoyed our segment and our unintelligent view on food. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to S. Pedro, who puts in a 10 and says, do you believe if the Russian government and economy fail, would they fractionize like Yugoslavia? And would NATO step in fast to aid new nations?
I don't think they balkanize. There would be some areas that break away, like a lot of the Caucasus Mountain region, or the Caucasus Mountain region would break away. But did I say it correct the first time or the second time, Matthew? Is it Caucasus or Caucasus?
It's Caucasus.
Okay, I'm stupid. It's the Caucasus Mountain regions. Those areas would break away, but I don't really think much else would. But I do thank you for the support and help with this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to W Sub, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, W Sub, for that support. They said, who were the Eager Beavers aircrew from World War I and their lucky old 666 B-17?
And I thank you for the support. Unfortunately, I'd have to declare ignorance on that because I actually do not know that historical story. Some people believe, I think you do, that I know everything because sometimes I'll just crap out info and it sounds like it's off the bat. So unfortunately, I don't know everything, and I think that's one of the things that I would not know enough about to talk about. But still, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Tom Exman, who puts in a 10. And thank you, Tom, as well for that support. And also, he put in some kind words about the super chats here. And thank you very much, Tom, for calling folks to action on that. We do not expect anything. And if anybody's generous enough to donate, we are just happy with that. So thank you very much, Tom, for the support and also continuing to donate to the channel and helping to keep us running. And we also have a $10 super chat from Siri, who said, cheers to civil discourse. And have you seen Sarajevo Rose's poignant form of damn. Let's see.
Dang, okay.
Poignant form of memorialization. I can't say that for my life, but it's
Memorialization?
EXO from, yes, there you go. EXO from Oslo.
And thank you so much for the support, Siri. And also, Sarajevo Roses. I haven't seen Sarajevo Roses. Let me go take a look at those. Sarajevo Rose is a type of memorial made from concrete scars caused by mortar shells. So this is it. A Sarajevo Rose. I've never seen these before. Very interesting form of memorialization, that's for sure.
Oh, I sound like I had a really bad study there. Oh, Jack.
Man, you're about to turn into King George V. You're about to go, I have a stammer. It's like, man. Still, thank you so much for the support, Siri, and thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for being one of our viewers all the way from Oslo in Norway. And so with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ed, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Ed, for that support as well. He said, Irish Ed here, and I'm about an hour behind. But my question is, what the hell is wrong with Putin? And why just not negotiate an end? They will fall hard. China is licking their chops. Also, fly Eagles fly.
Thank you so much for the support, and Fly Eagles Fly, hey! And thank you so much for the support. And we haven't seen Fly Eagles Fly in a minute. Actually, I don't know where he is right now, but still, I thank you so much for the support. And he doesn't want to end the war because he's still trying to achieve what he believes are Russia's strategic interests, although that's impossible at this point and a fleeting, dying concern, especially considering that Russia is now clearly going to be a Chinese satellite state. And so with that, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to W Sub once again. And YouTube said this is their first ever super chat, but that's a lie. I just literally read one off. But thank you very much, WC, for that 5 once again. And they said, eager beavers were the most decorated aircrew of World War II. Great story for the historian. Enjoy.
And I thank you so much for the support, W Sub E. And I will make sure to look into that. Unfortunately, I won't be able to do that tonight due to time concerns. We want to make sure to actually get through enough super chats to get to a decent amount of live chats if we can. But I will try and look into that after the stream if possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a 5 and says, LSA, hit the like button. That's an order. And will it take anything short of human life lost in order for NATO to invoke Article 5?
It most likely will involve the loss of life to invoke Article 5 or the loss of military equipment to be able to do something like that. But I do thank you so much for the support, LSA Sergeant Figment. And please, everyone, do hit the like button. That is an order. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, we have a 5 from Cachulian343, who said the fat electrician did a video on the eager beavers, and check it out, it's good content.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I will look into that. I will try and watch that video if I can. I was probably going to read a book or play Transport Fever 2 after the stream tonight. Or, well, actually, I was going to read about the planet Chicago. It's actually fairly interesting, or I might play Transport Fever 2, but I might check into that as well. So with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to David Malone, who said, who didn't say, but first of all, he put in a 5, and thank you very much, David, for that support. He said, thanks for doing a great job, guys, and I can't always afford to donate, but I do when I can. And thank you very much, David, for the support, by the way. We appreciate anything.
And thank you so much for the support, David. Truly, every support is massive support. And I got to thank you incredibly for finding this channel worthwhile to support, because whether you believe that the support is big or small, we find them to be massive, even if it's just $1. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to I'm a Nerd, who puts in the 5. And they said Romania here, and thanks for the news.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And great to hear from Romania. And we love
man.
We love Romania, because while Andrew Tate might be a stain on Romania's reputation, we do not hold that against him, because Andrew Tate is just he is what he is. I don't think that represents Romania at all. But still, thank you so much once again for support and help with this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to D's Nuts, who puts in a 5. They said, Russians paint us all the time with radar. Paint you all the time. Damn, that means something totally different.
Paint me like one of your French radars. Like it's
yeah. They said, nothing new. I've witnessed them do far dumber things, and I wonder why France decided to make it a big deal. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, honestly, I mean, I don't hear of target locks being made that often, to be perfectly honest. So I'm not sure what country you're from, but I've never heard that very often. But Enforcer, what say you?
I've never heard of anyone getting painted with a radar either. But I do thank you so much for the support, and I believe that's why it's a big deal, is because that usually normally never really happens. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Kachulian343, who puts in the 5. And thank you very much. They said Russia's been pissing off France and Africa for years, and France is starting to sound serious about sending troops. And I wonder if this is their casus belli.
I think it may be, possibly, because the Russians have been interfering in French, almost like colonial interests in Western Africa for a while, and so it appears that the French are getting incredibly aggravated with that, considering that it keeps on going. But with that, I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Plazath, who puts in a 5, and thank you very much, Plazath, for throwing in that $5 support. And they said, LLT, LSA.
And long live the Lee Spring Army. And thank you so much once again for the support, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are about to be moving on to the next one, but I just really want to quickly say this. I want to address this one. I can't resist, man. I just simply cannot resist. Nearly shot down. It was a radar lock. Nothing was nearly fired. One drone, not drones. This is why I unsubscribe, because if you're stretching the truth. Okay, there were 2 drones. The Romanian Ministry of Defense confirmed that, so you're just ignorant. And 2, the thing with the radar lock is that, yes, that is something big. Locking onto an aircraft with a radar of an air defense system that could fire a missile in just a second at the pull of a trigger is a big deal. That's kind of like saying, listen, the cops had no reason to go shoot that guy robbing the gas station. He only pulled a gun out and aimed it at him. He wasn't ever going to pull the trigger and shoot him. That's kind of the same logic. And does that really stand up? No, the cops will fill that guy with holes. Like, that's just how it works. So I hope that answers that well, because if you're unsubscribing over that, I don't think we're missing any kind of a valuable subscriber there. I'm sure you'd be well fit at the Hot Dog Man's channel, though. Low intelligence is a requirement to be there. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Danny B. Yet again, the 3rd support of the night. He puts in a 10 this time, and thank you very much, Danny, for that support. He said, I know you guys got to hurry when y'all start going fast. It reminds me of this guy called Mac Lethal, and it's called the Alphabet Song, and got to check it out. And y'all sounded like it last night, and good night. I'm out. Sorry.
And thank you so much for the support, Danny B. And we probably do sound like that. Whenever we start getting a little bit late into the night, we kind of have to speed up a little bit and start addressing things a little bit quicker, and that's why I start talking faster. Funnily enough, this is actually kind of the normal speed that I would normally talk at. I actually slow it down a little bit most of the time, so that way people can actually understand it, because I talk way too fast. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. Thanks. And with that, we're on to the next one. Thanks.
And thanks. Our next one here goes to Herpderb NV, who puts in a 5 and says, on the topics of rockets, check out the Sea Dragon rocket design from the same era as the Saturn V, and that would have been 75-foot diameter engine bell.
And let's take a look at this thing. Holy moly, dude! It's literally Gru's rocket from Despicable Me.
It really is. They're missing the minion.
Oh, but anyways, I hope that it's addressed that well. Thank you so much once again for support. Pretty wild, honestly. I can't believe that they even tried to design this thing or use it. But still, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. If it wasn't for folks like you, I would have never known about that. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Kyle Haynes, who puts in a 5 and says, earlier you misspoke and said that the rocket has to break out of Earth's gravity. I think you meant to say to get out of Earth's atmosphere.
Actually, no. It has to break free from the gravity. The atmosphere isn't what's holding the rocket to Earth. It's the gravitational pull, because the ISS is not in the atmosphere. Well, technically, it's like at the very, very edge of the atmosphere, but it's still in space. But usually, for the Saturn V's and such things, they had to break out of the gravity. The gravity is what's holding those spacecraft to Earth in their orbits. So you have to break free from gravity, not the atmosphere. Because by the time you're in space, you've already broken free from the atmosphere. Now the problem is breaking free of Earth's gravity to be able to, well, you have to achieve escape velocity to do that, to break out it free from Earth's gravity and then travel beyond Earth's gravitational pull. So with that, I thank you for the support. I did not misspeak. That was the correct way to state that. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Marc-Andre Burnett, who puts in a 2. And thank you very much, Mark, for once again supporting the channel and helping to keep us running. And with that, folks, that is actually our last super chat to get to. So we have all the time in the world to get to all of our remaining live chat questions, most likely. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right into it. And of course, we have to get the Morse code decoders first. Tonight, we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Royal Fluffiness, and Arabelle Garbo. Also, Joni Dog. And they said the Morse for tonight says NATO should respond with all measures to counter Russian aggression on our sphere. And LOT LSA, and as usual, great job.
And that's the sound of money. And y'all got that down on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all for getting that right time and time again, because y'all continue to get that right for 1,059 days and probably 1,059 days well into the future, because the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so with that, long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. And with that, we are finally on into the live chats. Take it away, Matthew. Take it away.
All right, so our first live chat question is going to go to John Sobery, and he said, I heard the French recon plane was targeted by an S-400, but it seems it would be out of range. Am I right?
No, it actually would have been largely within range. The S-400 has a significant range, if I remember correctly, and let me go make sure that I am correct on that information at the moment by pulling up the S-400 and trying to make sure that I'm able to get the operational range correct. According to the information that we have right now, the operational range of the S-400 could extend all the way out to about 250 miles with the most advanced form of missile. If we were to assume that it had a range of 250 miles, that means that it's actually able to cover the entirety of the southern Baltic Sea around Kaliningrad. So that aircraft would have actually been well within range of the longest range missiles, but it appears that the most average and normal kind of missile has a range of about 150 miles, which is still enough to largely cover the entirety of the southern Baltic, meaning that that maritime patrol aircraft would have been within range because it was within international waters. It was not within the territorial waters or the exclusive economic zone of any of the Baltic states, the Russian Federation, or Sweden when it was targeted, which means that it would have been well within the range of an S-400 missile system. And so it actually was within the range. And so I hope that does answer that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And moving on here to our next one. Also, I just saw something absolutely insane. We can't cover it because it's politics, or at least it involves some politics, but I've never seen anything like this in my life. But we'll have to save that for a private conversation because we can't discuss that on the air, but it's shocking. But anyways, moving on here to our next live chat question. This one goes to Muskrat. And they said, hi, guys. And I was wondering your thoughts on what would happen with the citizens if their money does get taken out from the Russian banks. And maybe there would be an uprising, but what do you think?
I think there would be some sort of mass civil unrest, because what in the world would people be working for at that point to give over more money to the state and not even keep it for themselves? I would have a feeling that probably would be the case, that mass civil unrest would follow. And so I hope that does answer that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to AF Kaplan, who says, with all of these incidents between Russia and NATO, what do you think it'll take for NATO to do something beyond a strongly worded statement of disapproval?
I believe that the Russian Federation will have to actively fire on NATO forces or end up killing citizens inside of a NATO country for anything to actually happen. I think that's really the determinant at this point, is that military equipment and personnel have to end up being destroyed or killed, or civilians have to end up being killed for NATO to make any kind of a major response. But even still, that might be questionable, because if it's a small amount of people, they might just overlook it. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to Anonymous, who said, are these planes able to carry weapons, and can the French respond with strike-capable planes fast?
Yes, the French can respond with strike-capable planes fairly quickly, at least in an incident like that. But when I mean fairly quickly, it will most likely be within a couple of hours. But that still is quick by military tables, at least with what the French military is working with at the moment. So technically, yes, but not quick enough to actually save that aircraft all out there on its own today, like it was in that scenario. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And also someone in the chat said, I'm guessing the new news that you can't mention has something to do with crypto. Yeah, it has something to do with crypto. Insanity out here. Insanity run amok.
Can you text it to me to tell me what's going on while I answer the next question? Because I'm really interested now in what that is.
So I'll say it with no politics involved. I'll just make it sort of like a vague references here. Someone is doing okay, you remember the Hawk Tua coin, right?
The rug pull, yeah.
Yeah, so someone, and they shall not be named, is doing something very similar to that, except they're in a much different position than simply saying Hawk Tua.
I'm not understanding exactly who that person is right now. Could you text me their name so that way I can get it, and then
I just sent it to you in the Discord DM. Can you see on the side screen, or do you need it texted?
I can pull that up on my phone. Let me take a look really quick.
Yeah, let's take a look at that real quick. I'm just like honestly blown away by that. I've never seen anything like that, by the way. I've studied politics for a long time. I've never seen anything like that.
Huh. Well, All right. Well, I can't make any comment on that, at least live on air. But anyways, we're going to move on to the next one. What do we have, Matthew? What do we have?
All right, so our next live chat question goes to Knox Date, who said, how weak Russia is right now, and it's growing to be the worst military between the other nuclear powers if war was to start, and will this really trigger a draft?
The Russian Federation is incredibly weak off at this point. I believe that they're weaker than the Iraqis were during the Gulf War of 1991, at least militarily. The only thing that differentiates them is their massive nuclear arsenal, and we don't even really know how well maintained or operational that is at the moment. So with this in mind, I would have to say that if a conventional war was to begin with the West, there probably wouldn't even be a draft, because the United States and the Western nations would be able to overpower the Russian Federation with simple superior firepower with the contract forces we have at the moment, and we would be able to pretty much just wipe the Russians off the floor. If we didn't do that, there might be a draft, but I don't believe a war would last long enough for that to ever happen. We would most likely get into a strategic nuclear exchange before a draft could ever happen, because the Russians would largely be on the back foot that quickly. But with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Scott Shabalam. And he said, my question about these drones is, what if this is the result of jamming, or Russia just says it did and acts like they didn't do anything?
And what is that in pertainment to?
Let's see here. Hold on a second. My question about these drones is, what if this is the result of jamming, or Russia just says it did and acts like... I'll be honest with you, Scott. I'm not understanding that question. I think it's running my brain for a loop for some reason. I thought I understood the first time, but I don't think I understand it. Do you understand it still, Enforcer, or not?
Unfortunately, I do not. So I believe we're going to have to declare ignorance on that one and then move on to the third to last question of the night again.
And this is actually going to be the last question of the night, because it's the last one in the spreadsheet.
Okay. What happened, Jack? Look, it's all going according to plan. It's all according, drawn up. Stocking spaghetti in the grocery store. But anyways, it's time for us to move on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer will be AF Kaplan. But also, real quick, returning to Scott's question, because he did provide some clarification, and since we said it, we might as well grab it. He said, I meant for the drones that crossed the border into Romania. So he wants to know if they crossed the border into Romania because a result of jamming, or maybe Russia just said they sent them across because that's it.
It's largely uncertain. We believe that they probably sent them over just because it doesn't really seem as though there's a lot of electronic warfare jamming abilities that the Ukrainians have put near Izmail and Renai, because while they are ports along the Danube, their strategic significance is far decreased compared to any other city or any other location throughout Ukraine. So we would believe the Russian Federation did that just because they did it. Or maybe they lost a signal with the drone for other reasons beyond electronic warfare. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you for clarifying that. Sorry, we didn't understand that initially. And also, a big shout out to Ryan H., who threw an F5 and said, hello, Enforcers. Are you both planning to watch the inauguration on Monday? I think it'll be pretty interesting this year with it being indoors. Is it being held indoors, Matthew?
Yeah, it's being held indoors allegedly because it's too cold outside. However, there's been inaugurations before held outside in the same temperature and it hasn't been a problem. So I imagine it's over security concerns.
Wait, hang on. Washington, D.C. weather. Hang on a minute. So it's going to be.
It'd also be smart to hold it inside, to be straight up honest, just for security reasons. But that's just me.
But it's breaking tradition. I don't like that.
Reagan had his inside, by the way. You know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, he was inside. He was inside of the rotunda, I think.
Huh. I wonder why he did that. But it is freezing cold that day. I mean, I will say that. The high is going to be 25. The low is going to be 11. That's degrees Fahrenheit, by the way, not Celsius. So it is going to be very, very cold that day. But at the same time, like, listen, call me, who the hell, Henry Harrison Tyler, I believe his name was, who became the president, gave a speech in the pouring rain when it was freezing cold, and then he died like 30 days later from the flu. Like, call me that. Even in that kind of temperature, just to keep with tradition, I do it outside. Like, Lee Harvey Oswald might be out there, but I'd still do it outside just because of the tradition. I'm just saying, like, that's what I would do. But it is freezing cold, so I can kind of get it, but at the same time, I just don't like hearing that tradition is being broken. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. I'll be honest with you, I'm probably not going to be watching the inauguration. because I already have plans, because our only day off is Monday, and I've already made plans with someone else to go do something that's pretty much going to be taking up the entirety of the day that day. So I won't really have the chance to watch the inauguration, but I've seen all of the inaugurations that have ever happened growing up, so it's nothing new. You know, they put their hand on a Bible, they swear them in, they're the president for the next 4 years. It's a big event, but you know, it's something that I'm fine with missing, because I personally, I'll be frank with you all, I haven't really been able to get out of the house or do anything for 2 months because we've been busy with a million different things in the background, and this is the first time this upcoming Monday that I've been able to get the time to be able to go do something. So that's kind of why
I'll watch it and I'll let you know how it goes.
Oh, it'll probably be fine. I'm sure there'll be a plug, you know, for Hawk to a coin and all that, you know, it'll be great. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on to the final question of the night. And so who was the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and that viewer is going to be AF Kaplan, who said, with all these incidences between Russia and NATO, what do you think it'll take for NATO to actually do something beyond a strongly worded statement of disapproval?
I believe we've already answered that one, Matthew. We had one that I think that sounded identical to that a little while ago.
We might have, but this one's worded slightly differently and it's on a slightly different topic.
I would say that if there was any loss of life or an attack on military personnel that resulted in actual physical damage, that would most likely be enough to provoke an invocation of Article 5. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, fairly well. And also I see a lot of people saying, oh, what's the enforcer going to be doing? I'll just be honest with y'all. I'm going to go meet my best friend, who I have not seen in about a year and a half, 2 years probably. I'm going to go hang out with him on Monday, because he's in the, well, not to give a lot of details, but he's in the armed forces. He's going to be back in the area, and we've planned this out about 2 months out, because he was able to get leave. He's going back to see his family, and I was like, hey, that would be cool if we, you know, went and hung out for a little bit and chit chatted and stuff, because I haven't been able to get out of the house. Even then, it was like for a week by the time we had made that plan, and so now it's been 2 months, and I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to go do something with my best friend that I know from school, and you know, see how things are going and everything. So that's what I'm doing. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And it is time for us to round out tonight's stream. I got to thank everyone so much once again for watching. It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to cover the news for each and every single one of y'all. At the peak tonight, we had 8,000 people here, and about 55,000 people have watched the stream before it ended. We are, of course, honored and greatly appreciative to have been able to cover the news for all of y'all, and we hope that y'all will join us here tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die, and there will be a stream tomorrow, Butcher Crouton. That's happening on Monday. That's what I was talking about. I probably won't be able to watch the inauguration. But with that, good night and take care.
And with that, folks, thank you all once again for another great stream tonight. And also, be sure to join us all tomorrow midday. The Enforcer, if there is enough news to cover, we'll be making tomorrow a short war video. So be sure to tune in for that midday if there is enough news to cover. And also tomorrow night as well for the next nightly war news stream at 10 p.m. Eastern. But with that, smack the like on the way out. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroem Slava. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Get some rest and good night.
Army shall